Let me open a special meeting, City Council, City of Pearland, for Saturday, August the 8th, 2020. And it is at least 8:30 a.m. This session will be, which is budget process one, will be conducted by telephone and video conferencing. And appreciate each and one of you being here. Moving in my agenda to item one is called order, which I have just done. Moving to item number two is citizen comments, and I'll call on Mayor Pro Tem Perez to address this issue.
Thank you. We have two speakers who have signed up to speak for this budget meeting, and I will call them out in the order for which I received them. First, Mr. Jeff Hunkiel. Mr. Hunkiel.
Hello. Yes, thank you. My address is 3912 Oakwood Drive North, Pearland, Texas, 77581. Good morning, everyone. I have reviewed, thank you. I have reviewed a lot of the budget, and I think more needs to be cut during these uncertain times. I know there are already items taken out, but even more needs to be done. It's very telling at the beginning of the proposed budget when the revenue is 89.9 million, yet the expenditures are 89.5. That means the city plans to use all but $350,000, which would put the city far under the policy minimum of 16.6%. The only reason the city will be over is due to a beginning balance of 19 million. We can't continue to spend money like the city has in the past. I would also like to talk about the 2% COLA across the board. I know every employee believes they all deserve a raise, but I hope all employees go through an annual review, and some are going to score higher than others. I would suggest a rating system if one isn't currently in place of 1 to 5 based on how they meet their annual goals. Then, if a blanket percentage is given, employees get 100% of that percentage if they met all of their goals and ranked as a 1. If they scored a 2, they get 80% of the 2%, a 3 gets 60, and so on. When giving out a raise across the board, you are rewarding the poor performers, and the high performers have no incentive since they get the same as the rest. Another area is the healthcare. Many companies I've worked for pay for the benefits of their employees, but not such a high percentage of their dependents, especially when some of these taxpayers are struggling to pay for their own health benefits that are now paying for others. I do wish the line items would be in Excel, which would make it easier for me to get summarized total for common items. Due to the economy, my company halted all conferences and seminars since they didn't show a high return on investment, and it was one area that was easily cut. I summed these amounts, and you are budgeting $733,000 on conferences and seminars, and then another $107,000 on membership and dues. That's $841,000 just for 2 items in the budget. I have another suggestion. If conferences are so valuable and you believe there's such a great ROI on them, I suggest sending 1 employee, and that employee has to come back and give a presentation to educate the others. At a former company, employees stopped going because they didn't want to have to actually pay attention and take notes. These conferences are usually mini vacation for employees. Eliminating those 2 items for 1 year just saved almost $1 million. I have previously spoken on other ways to trim this budget, and I think we really need to slow the spending so we can position ourselves better for the future. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks, sir. Next, we have Ms. Felicia Kyle. Or Harris Hoss, I apologize. Are you on?
I am. I'm on by phone, Council and Mayor. Good morning.
All right. Please state your name and address for the purpose of the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Felicia Harris Haas, 3112 Sumac 77584. Good morning, Mayor and Council. In the time allotted this morning, I'd like to ask for Council's assistance in finding out some specific factual information related to the budget. For context, a little background, on May 9th, 2019, one of the council members signed 2 sworn affidavits. One of the affidavits states, and I quote, I have a substantial interest in Keep Pearland Beautiful in that I am the executive director of KPB, and I receive compensation from KPB that exceeds 10% of my gross income. I am disclosing this information pursuant to Chapter 171 of the Texas Local Government Code. The other affidavit reads, the City of Pearland and Keep Pearland Beautiful are parties to an agreement for KPB's operation of the Stella Roberts Recycling Center. As the executive director of KPB, I am disclosing my employment relationship with KPB pursuant to Section 2-77 of the city's ethics ordinance. As a result, I will leave the room and I will abstain from participation in any matter before the City Council as it may relate directly or indirectly to KPB. The indication is that there is a financial interest. The Stella Roberts Recycling Center is listed on the city's website as a city-owned facility. KPB's website previously included a copy of its 2017 tax return. In that return, Schedule A disclosed that KPB's reason for being a public charity and having that status is because it is, quote, an organization that normally receives a substantial part of its support from a governmental unit or from the general public. And in that document, it refers to Part 2 of Schedule A for more information. In Part 2, KPP disclosed that it received $108,553 as, quote, value of services or facilities furnished by a governmental unit to the organization without charge. And its percentage of public support was 98.66. Under Schedule B of the return, the first and largest contributor listed was the City of Pearland, which contributed $279,223 in 2017. So here's the questions. Does the city manager's fiscal year 2021 proposed budget recommend continuation of the city's agreement with KPB for the Stella Roberts Recycling Center and or the payment or contribution of the city's public funds to KPB in fiscal year 2021? If so, please tell the residents how much is proposed and the difference between fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 20, and where in the budget documents the residents can find the information for both the value of the facility's use and the amount of money the city plans to pay to KPB in fiscal year 2021. This is obviously important because I know our collective goal is full transparency, especially with respect to financial information. This information matters to help determine whether this workshop today, this morning, that council is having relates in any way directly and or indirectly to KPB, and whether one of the council members will need to sit out budget discussions and or abstain from voting on the budget in September. I appreciate your time and look forward to getting those answers. Thank you.
That's all we have, Mayor. We're ready to continue on with the remainder of the meeting.
Okay, moving in our agenda to item number 3, which is roll call certification quorum. We have already identified all of our members being here except for Councilmember Little. So, Madam Secretary, I will certify a quorum for this particular meeting. Moving into item number 4, which is says purpose of the meeting, and of course it's discussion of the proposed budget for 2020-2021. Item 5 is new business, and this is an opportunity for our staff to present, and there'll be after each one of the items, we'll have the little discussion period, and I'll ask Councilmember Mayor. I'll ask our city manager, Clay Pearson, if he would mind. Did I lose my?
I'm here.
Okay.
All right.
Good
morning, Mayor and Council, and thank you again for your time this morning. It is another beautiful day in Pearland. We have lots of great opportunities and pleased to share with you and go over the city's recommended FY21 fiscal year budget, which begins October 1. So in the transmittal, in this, today is the first formal budget discussion. You've had the document for about a week already, but there's time before our next meeting on the 17th to capture more of your questions. This process began with you back in February with that other Saturday session. We reviewed and had another Saturday on the capital improvement program. But staff's been working on this continuously at all levels. I want to thank them again for all their diligent work and bringing to you the material that you have for your consideration. So we'll go through it. Today's mostly us presenting and summarizing some of the opportunities and topics of the recommended budget. And then, as I say, a week from Monday, we'll meet again on Monday night, and we can circle back with your answers to your questions and anything else that you bring up between now and then. We do need to have a resolution on that August 17 meeting to propose the maximum tax rate. We could go below whatever you said at that time, but we have to declare our maximum. And so we'll touch on that to know how to prep up the resolution. So, you know, it is a beautiful day in Pearland today, but we also have the backdrop of a lot of uncertainty and events that either one of these on their own, either the COVID-19 pandemic or the energy glut and resulting economic issues. But we have both of those going on. But really the standout and the test for Pearland is to maintain our resiliency. That's a theme we talk about through here and something we emphasize to our staff. And by resiliency, I mean our ability to not only absorb these shocks, but also come back stronger and be better for it and thrive going forward and be ready for whatever comes next, good and bad. So from a big budget picture, this budget is structurally balanced. Operating revenues exceed operating expenditures. We're adding further to the fund balance that because of diligence through prior years and especially FY20, we added substantially. Wanted to do that through the years as we communicated in many times, many ways by reviewing expenditures and tracking the revenues. We did make estimates on the impacts to the revenue side and pleased that those have performed better than we anticipated thus far. But really thought it was important to go through and maintain flexibility. And that's why we're suggesting this net positive addition even further above and beyond the already positive fund balance we have. So this table here from a high level shows the taxable value from the community. This is a accumulation of the three appraisal districts' values. And this is important not only from the standpoint of how it drives and improves the property tax revenue and spreads that out across the values, but also as a measure of community economic resiliency, the values that continue to stay positive, and Pearland continues to be an attractive place for residents and businesses, and values are appreciating, which is of course positive for people that hold those. The value of the city is substantial. It's just over the about $12 billion. $9.5 billion is quote unquote the straight normal value, and then there's $3 billion from TIRZ #2, which is the Shadow Creek development, which we've talked about, which has become an increasingly important part of our portfolio that will expire obviously at the end of the decade. But for now, that's about $3 billion, and that continues to appreciate. So the values are increasing, and it's a positive again for both the property owners and for the all the taxing districts, the schools, the counties, et cetera, that have property tax as a component of their revenue stream. And then from the rate side, which is applied to those, the city is about, depending on which school district your property is, about a third of the total. So, you know, by that, every dollar is paid in total property taxes, a third goes to the city for our services. The rate that's recommended for next year is 2 cents below the current FY20 rate. 25 million of that goes to the general fund, and the balance 34 million to debt service. That includes in-city MUD rebates. The portion of debt service has been talked about, you know, since I've been with the city for the last 6+ years. Back in before that, back in FY14, the debt portion was about 71% of the levy, and there was 30.5% for operations. So that has moderated. Debt service is a smaller portion of the overall rate, and that leaves 42% of operations. So I know council, again, has targeted that will change substantially with the TIRZ coming off, but that's a topic for another day. But overall, the rate is decreased, and it's a larger portion for operations day in, day out, police, fire, parks, public works, versus debt service. And this table shows the different scenarios. We've used this last few years to show the impacts of different rate scenarios. On the left in blue there, you see the 20 current rate, what that 74 cents does for revenue, and the division of that. The green is the proposed tax rate, and that shows the distribution there. And then the number 2 there is the no new revenue rates, and the state used to call that the effective tax rate. Back in February, council gave us a stretch goal to come in with at or below the effective tax rate, what we called it back then. We've met that goal and exceeded it by coming in below that. So according to the state calculation, the city's taking in less net revenue from that comparison, and the appraisal district calls that a tax decrease. And by the math, there's also from the state formula what used to be called the rollback rate, and that used to be 8% more revenue. Now it's 3.5% revenue, and you see the rate there. But bottom line, we're recommending and coming in with that balanced budget and with adding a little bit to further to fund balance below both of those. So significant from both of those perspectives. So how does the combination of the values and the rates affect actual tax bills? We've had a portfolio of about 10 properties, homestead properties throughout the city, different neighborhoods, and we've compared those. Again, this is only a city portion. Recognize that different properties have different school districts, maybe a MUD, et cetera. But the combination of the values and the rates, this shows. There's going to be every property is unique in terms of their value in different neighborhoods and how those are performed. You see in example 8 that's circled there, if the value was increased 5%, and with our rate, that would be about $65 increase and $5 a month. It's important on the far right with the exemptions and the freezes there. Seniors pay, when they're eligible, substantially less than anybody. That the total dollar amount is very small relative to the others, and it is no change year over year. That's the benefit of that freeze. And then here's a couple of other examples. The one on the far left shows if there is no value change, and there are some of those actually, what the rate does for that, and that'd be $40 less in city property tax portion, and then a small increase in example 4 there, 1%, and that still provides a less on that particular example. Our other revenue I want to highlight is sales tax. It's important not only from how much it provides into operations and all of the PEDC operating revenue, but also as another indicator of economic vitality and activity. This is something back in March when the shutdown was ordered for health reasons, we were very concerned about and how that impact monthly sales tax revenues. We had no basis on which, no historical example on which to base those. So we did our best estimates. Pleased that the Pearland example is that sales tax have performed well, very well relatively. In fact, last month was actually higher than the year prior. And so we'll obviously keep an eye on this. There's something that we get monthly. We'll be due for another revenue quickly here. And but this is something that has been a positive. And so, as I said in the transmittal, this is really a function of the makeup of our retail base. It's a lot of business to consumer firms, large box retailers with name brand recognition. generate the vast majority of the sales tax in Pearland. It is different than other places that may have more visitor or business traffic or more business to business sales. And so expect that this will continue to perform relatively well and hold up as we go forward. And economic development and continued growth is important for all kinds of reasons. Continuing that vitality and that resilience, building activity, again, continues to be positive and move forward. There has not been a full stop whatsoever. We continue to have good discussions with developers and builders, both on the residential side and various commercial interests. And so we've been pleased with that performance on the revenue side for building permit activity, community development side, and then what that brings more importantly for long-term investment in the community, jobs and the like. And also wanted to touch on at least the our work for promoting economic development, and that is exemplified by our new Pearland Prosperity economic development strategy. The city's had a great plan that we've been executing over the last, call it decade. Pearland Economic Development Corporation will actually be celebrating their anniversary coming up here. And it's even better to have a new strategic plan. The two pillars of that plan are seeking economic growth and diversification, trying to diversify that tax base and continue to bring in quality developments and employers and investments. And the other part is investing and making decisions that will make Pearland a community of choice in this greater Houston area. There's lots of competition out there. We realize that. We thrive on that competition, and we want Pearland to be known as have that quality of place and attractiveness that people want to live and move and visit towards. And so between these two pillars, there's the 7 strategies that you should be familiar with from the adoption of the Pearland Prosperity Economic Development Plan. So getting into some of the areas, I'll touch a little bit more, but this is a people organization. We've got fantastic staff at all levels and different areas. The city's a complex organization that does all kinds of things of services on a daily basis. So the people are the linchpin in that. We do have, we're able, I'm pleased to be able to recommend the 2% cost of living adjustment, just confirmed to the cost of living adjustment is across the border to keep people's pay at par with inflation. There is still inflation out there, and so this keeps people at least at that. When we're developing this budget, this wasn't a certainty that we're going to be able to accommodate that, but the numbers came in good enough that we were able to recommend this beginning in October again. So it's a appropriate and modest adjustment that we're able to recommend. Also includes for the civil service pay plan, the step increases there, and longevity pay. There's a per month small recognition for years of service. And then as you adopted, our healthcare offerings have been competitive, and because of our management of that and the employees' participation in that and a good consultant that's been working with the providers, there was no increase in what's paid out from the employees for the healthcare. So, and sometimes, it's either is or perceived that while we give some pay increase, we had to adjust the healthcare because the cost increases there, which cut into, the actual overall package, but that's not the case this year. And then again, we're relying on these people. They need to stay current with modern expectations, requirements. Again, we do a lot of different things and different functions. And so across all funds with 800 plus employees, the investment in the professional development, just over $1 million. So then on the expenditure side, you've seen this shot, but it is a people organization. Almost 3/4 of the general fund expenditures are towards salaries and wages. And so When we're talking about changes of any substance to budget, that's the area that has the largest leverage. And then the other, what people do, it's a public safety focus in the general fund. Over half of the total expenditures are for this classification, police and fire, and that's stayed consistent year over year. It's a slight uptick, probably particularly as we've built up the fire EMS side to be a modern full-time department. Some of those public safety highlights include we're able to, again, a very big positive. As population grows, this is not a status quo community. Added 2 additional sworn officers on the police side with a vehicle, and then 12 additional firefighters. This rounds out the complement to be able to staff the ladder we've purchased for new Station 8, which will be there. Those positions had been budgeted in FY20. We were successful. This is probably another one of our highlights and successes from the city side in getting a SAFER grant for 12 other firefighters. We deferred these additions for the second rig, and we're pursuing another grant. And so if we're successful, there's no guarantees. I think it's a very competitive program. I think our odds are, we shouldn't assume that, but one way or another, we've got the money budgeted for those additional firefighters in the FY21 budget to staff that additional ladder. And if we are fortunate enough to get that SAFER grant, we'll have that monies available to reprogram. So the other part of the Pearland story is building out our infrastructure, our facilities, our parks to be a city of 120,000 plus. This has happened very rapidly. We've had to build out the bones of this city with its road network and its water and sewer network and treatment plants, and to be that city very quickly. We've not had the luxury of doing that gradually over time. The reality is that those people are here, and we need to have all of those critical elements in place. And so we've got a large capital improvement program that we've been successfully executing every year. And, it's something we pay attention to. And these are long-term investments. The majority of the expense side is from the city is water and wastewater. That's a enterprise fund, a business unit that's supported by those rates and fees. The plus side is not only from the construction cost standpoint, but also the financing has been extremely positive from the city's perspective. And we've been able to get very low interest rates to finance those required improvements. Because of the state subsidy on the Texas Water Development Board, it's actually been 0% on the large water plants. We're going to be pursuing that as well for the wastewater side. But, that's been very positive because those improvements are going to happen one way or another, and we're paying a lot less interest because of the market and the city's sound finances that have a great credit rating for us. The people don't see the water and the wastewater system. They just know it's there and they count on it, and they assume it's just magically happens on demand. We do see the road network, and that's another piece of the Pearland story that's been positive, where we're building out the road network. Broadway, that's a state project, but going along with that, the city's been opportunistic and working on Hughes Ranch Road. We've got Smith Ranch Road coming up. We've got the McCard Road extension that you've awarded and we'll start to see come on. This particular project is a Majestic Road project. That's actually the Beltway and the 288 work that all comes together. So that helps our residents getting to and from the metro area. But then the city has projects that tie into that and take advantage of that as well that I mentioned. One thing that we do talk about too, and I wish we'd like to do more of, is maintenance and operations. The graph on the right shows that dollars spent now save more dollars later. It's better to maintain than to reconstruct from a cost standpoint. And so You know, we're not where we would ideally like to be. I don't know that there is a perfect number. You know, the payment management index report and so forth, you know, that gave the big $4.6 million out there. We're not anywhere close to that. But the good thing is that, again, another positive in this budget is we're recommending more than we put into FY20 for that maintenance of streets and sidewalks. So the street work will do about 1.5 miles and do some maintenance with the mud raising. That's on the sidewalk side, I'm sorry. And then the street work does 4 miles of roadway. And a lot of that's being done with the county and other kinds of partners like that. We need to, people expect quality police and fire services. We meet and exceed that. They also expect water and wastewater systems to be robust and to be available, and we do that. But the amenities, the parks and recreation, and you know, amenities is probably the best word for that, frankly. It's a quality of life investment. And thanks to the voter approved 2019 bond issue, we've got some improvements there for existing parks to keep those attractive and give people a room to spread out and enjoy and stay healthy. We've also got some smaller investments for the dog park, one of the dog parks at Independence Park, and then the fitness center. We need to keep that up, and so we're recapitalizing that so that equipment is stays competitive. You know, there's another theme here throughout in terms of that tax increment reinvestment zone funds, the Shadow Creek. Again, very, very successful from the outset. The leadership of Pearland years ago had a lot of great foresight and ambition. Going forward on that, the structure of the deal is positive. We have great partners with Alvin ISD and Fort Bend and Missouri County to make that all possible. And so that in the last decade of the TIRZ, there's a few elements that are worthy of noting. That first bullet is that the city invested in the extension of Broadway. We function as the developer there, and we have the TIRZ is performing so well financially that the city will be reimbursed for our $8 million investment back in the day with interest. And so the last projection from the TIRZ, we just had a meeting on Thursday about the financials, is that we actually will, looks like we'll see upwards of $1 million in FY21 for the first tranche of repayments on that. And then the balance, $7 million as early as FY22. And so we are going to suggest that we recognize that and into the motor pool fund, that first $1 million, and let that flow down to the fund balance, not expended until we have that. But that's a big positive. The other thing is that the city's getting done substantial public improvements in the tax reinvestment zone, and the city's the developer. And so we're financing that in the interim with the certificates of obligation. So things like the fire station number 8 and the equipment is all being purchased and going to be reimbursed so long as the pro formas continue to hold up so well from the TIRZ. And that's a wonderful thing. The Shadow Creek Library, another huge investment, positive to keep all of Pearland competitive and promote lifelong learning. That's set up to be awarded shortly here for the improvement there, and that'll be another TIRZ project. Once it's built, it'll be operated by Missouri County Library System. So there's $44 million in public improvements that are scheduled over the next 5 years to be reimbursed by that TIRZ. And then that bullet there, just to remind the council, as a developer, and the deal of the TIRZ is that developers are paid back with interest on their improvements. So we're going to be paying out less interest than what we're going to earn from the TIRZ back from that standpoint. So we're hustling and taking advantage of this window of opportunity to do those TIRZ projects before it expires. We've got to get them done. We got to get in line, and the TIRZ has to continue to perform to get us reimbursed before it expires. So switching over to the self-sustaining enterprise fund of that runs our water and sewer operation, pleased that we can also recommend that there's no rate revenue increase projected for FY20. And that includes an assumption for the long-standing way that the winter quarter average has been calculated. Gets complex, but that's a way that we estimate usage that from the water that doesn't impact the wastewater side. And so, it's been, long time, years and years that's been done a certain way, but we're going to be recommending to update that and make some changes to that. We need to see that's going to affect revenue. So we need to see how that actually flows through. We've got some estimates, but it's new. And so even with that change, we can still recommend the no rate increase overall. So as I close out here, I want to just note in terms of context, I talked about the pandemic that we've all been dealing with, and staff's been robust and adjusting and changing operations and trying to stay healthy and keep the public healthy and continue our work. Talked about the economic issues, but also in this country, we've got, there's been hopefully an awakening and recognition of longstanding issues of justice and race and equity. Pearland is a proudly diverse community. It's one of the reasons that, I came, that people come here, that we love it. And that third bar shows that, it is not just talk of being a diverse community, it is, and from the ethnicity lens, there's not a majority population group. Other places are diverse, but not that different kind of breakdown that we enjoy here. That's something that keeps Pearland strong and all kinds of offerings culturally, and neighbors of all backgrounds are part of this community. We're committed at the city to being an inclusive organization, place that protects that we, from our policing side, that we emphasize and stay aware of what's going on and talk to people, listen of what's going on, different experiences. And we want to make sure that we're not only a organization that offers services in an equitable way, but also an employer that provides is equitable and welcomes people of all different backgrounds. So to start to wrap up this slide, just if you don't want to read two binders and you just want to look at one slide, this may be one way to look at it. This just shows the whole budget and how that's broken out in terms of our functions, and then the different areas that it does and some of the highlights there. And then Mayor and Council, I want to again thank you for your attention and reading this as we go forward and paying attention throughout the year. I also want to give a huge thanks and appreciation to the staff. They are wonderful people. They're professionals. They care. They are trying to learn and do their work ever better. We count on them. We need to stay flexible and adaptable and continue to be kind to each other as we go forward, because our staff and working with the community and a lot of different partners are the ones that will get us through, the crisis of today and the issues of today, so that we are better from a cultural, economic, and a social standpoint as we go forward. So with that, I will, I believe, flip it over to Mr. McCarter for some actual more numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and frankly, a privilege to present this fiscal year 2021 budget for your consideration this morning. Before we dive into the nuts and bolts, I do want to cover some high-level items. First and foremost, I want to reiterate Mr. Pearson's gratitude to all the staff that were involved in the development of this budget. Namely, we have our new budget officer, Eric Roche, who came on board and has led this process over the last month and a half or so. Neely Walker, senior budget analyst, who's played a major leadership role as well. Rachel Winslow, budget analyst for 3 of our major departments in the city, supports our salaries and benefits as well. Hua Wen, financial analyst who is also new with the city and played a major supporting role. Rhonda Doherty, our assistant finance director, who supported us on the property tax side and played a leadership role putting this budget together as well. Also the city manager's office, obviously, who plays a major role in the policy development and direction for us. Also want to recognize the staff across the city. In a normal year, quote unquote normal year, this is an intense process and we ask a lot of them. This is not a normal year, and thus we've asked even more of them, and they've stepped up to help us, to support us, to get this budget balanced and delivered on time to you, City Council. So I want to thank all of them for their time and effort. Also want to point out that we have all of the materials for today's presentation, and we'll have all the materials for the future presentations posted on the city's website. If you go to pearlandtx.gov/FY21 budget, you can find all the materials there. We will continue to update that page as we move ahead. But for anyone following along at home, you can find the presentation today, along with the binder and all the supporting materials for our planning and how we've gotten to this point today at that webpage. Also want to recognize and thank you, Mayor and Council, not just for your time this morning, but for your time over the next month and a half as we dive into this big, thick budget document, make our way through to adoption in September. There's a lot of work ahead of us over the next 3 budget discussions and public hearings and 2 readings of the budget. This is an intense process. We just want to say we appreciate your service and your effort in the months to come. To set the stage for really everything that's in this budget, we want to talk about first our 6 strategic priorities. These were adopted by City Council 5-6 years ago, I believe, and have been really the focal point of our planning efforts since that time. You'll see this not only throughout the budget document, but in Thursday packets. Really in everything that we do is centered around these 6 strategic priorities. And the purpose of these priorities is for us as an organization, not just to function in our silos as departments and think about our own piece of the pie, but to think about deliverables and mandates to the community. What are we obligated to provide to this community to support the citizenry, to support our stakeholders and make this Pearland the wonderful community it is and growing in the future. So you'll see these recur throughout the presentation and throughout the budget document. Want to point them out here at the start. Want to start with a pretty basic question today, and for those of you who've been through this process before, this might seem obvious, but acknowledging that not everyone has a degree in public finance and not everyone's engaged in this process all the time, want to start out with what is a budget? What are we doing here today? First and foremost, the budget is a policy document. We met back in February and reviewed the city's comprehensive financial policies that cover really everything that we do on the finance end. And we talked about some broad strokes, strategic policy decisions, some kind of 30,000-foot level decisions that City Council wanted to see, that staff recommended, that we had gotten feedback from citizens on prior. This budget is the next step in that policy cycle. This is the implementation of those policies that we talked about. This is that next step. Obviously, it's a financial plan, especially if you open up Book 2. There's a lot of numbers in this plan, and this is at its very core a financial document that guides us and keeps us on this strong path that we've been on historically, financially moving ahead. Third, it's an operations guide. I keep my budget on my desk and I refer to it often, as do staff across the city. Once this document gets adopted by City Council, it's imported into our financial system and it supports our core functions. So it not only salaries and wages, which is our biggest component of the budget, but police uniforms and parks and recreation programming, all of it comes from the discussions that we have over the next month and a half. And once adopted, really gets handed off to departments to take it, to run with it, and to provide those core services supporting those strategic priorities throughout the fiscal year. Lastly, it's a communications device. This budget is thick and there's a lot of numbers in it. And like I said, not everyone has a degree in public finance. Not everyone is focused on this day in, day out. So we use this as an opportunity to increase transparency, to really focus on communication and try to engage the community as much as we can throughout the next month and a half in a transparent manner to make this information accessible to everybody and to communicate our priorities and what we are proposing as staff, what City Council wants as a governing board to move those priorities ahead, again, in a transparent manner. So diving into the general fund is the city's main operations fund. So police, fire, most of public works, parks, general government, all budgeted out of the general fund. Highlights listed here are our supplemental requests. Mr. Pearson mentioned this at the outset, but most notably here, 12 firefighters, another round of continuous onboarding. This allows us to staff the third apparatus at fire station number 8 due to open later this fiscal year. This will allow us to staff that third apparatus and complete the first phase of opening that fire station. Also, 2 sworn police officers being added, staggered throughout the fiscal year. The first for traffic, dedicated to traffic. The second for DDAX, that's data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety, and adding to the manpower there. Next, we have police vehicle replacement. This is 17 Crown Victorias. We've talked a lot about Crown Victorias over the last 2 years, it seems like. This 17 will complete the replacement program for those Crown Victorias, which Ford no longer services. So keeping those on the road has become expensive. And we want to make sure that we're providing our officers with the highest quality equipment that we can. Lastly, cybersecurity training. This is split between general fund and water and sewer, and really an important piece of making sure that we, as an organization, remain safe from external threats and avoid any liability there. Sustainable infrastructure, another key point, something that we talk about every fiscal year. Street and sidewalk funding here at $1.3 million represents an increase of roughly $200,000. A far cry from where we need to be, but an increase nonetheless. This street and sidewalk funding will be a transfer out to the new last fiscal year infrastructure redevelopment fund, which was established to create a dedicated funding mechanism for streets and sidewalks. Next, we have Engaged Community, our community survey, which is done every 2 fiscal years. This is really an important piece for our community engagement and for us as an organization to get a barometer of where the community is at, what they're prioritizing, what we need to work on and focus on in future fiscal year budgets and in our day-to-day operation. Lastly, the cost of living adjustments, step pay, and longevity across all funds, all those salary adjustments add up to $1.5 million, almost $1.6 million. What is not in this budget? We want to absolutely acknowledge the shortcomings that we have in this budget. This does not solve all of our problems and does not address all the critical mandates that we have. First and foremost, we talk about streets and sidewalks. We're short by $3.3 million of our target funding for streets and sidewalks. If you remember, several fiscal years ago, we did sponsor a pavement condition index study that basically went around the city and looked at every street and every sidewalk and told us what the condition was. Now, Pearland, being a relatively new community in the grand scheme of things, scored pretty well in that pavement condition index. And we were given a number of how much we needed to invest annually to maintain that good pavement condition index. We've fallen short of that number every year, just given constraints in the general fund and the reality of funding that high level of, I believe it was almost $5 million annually. That shortfall will lead to a denigration of that pavement condition index over the long term if we don't reach that goal at some point in the near future. Next, vehicle replacements. We talk about Crown Victorias and the police department. You know, we have 16 or so other departments, most of which have replacement vehicle needs as well. In the general fund, we have $23.6 million worth of replacements that meet our eligibility requirements that are not funded in this budget. Those eligibility requirements are developed by our fleet staff, who are experts at making sure that we have the right vehicles out in the field. And to meet those needs is another $23.6 million. Again, with the reality of the general fund over the last few fiscal years and really even prior to that, we have not been able to meet that need. Next, we talk about staffing requirements in the general fund. $5 million of requests came in this fiscal year for staffing in general fund. Now, when we talk about supplemental requests, staffing is far and away the #1 request that we see from departments and the #1 need. That shouldn't be surprising. We are a growing city, and that means that we are keeping up constantly with a community that's bigger than our staffing size. So we talk a lot about firefighters and bringing that department up to where they need to be staffing-wise, but that need exists in other departments as well. You see 36 as the need unfunded in public safety. but that also trickles down to every other department, both outward-facing and internal service departments as well. And then lastly, $600,000 in non-staff supplemental requests. So we have a total of $5.6 million in supplemental requests that are not funded in this budget. Now, supplemental request is defined as any funding request that adds a service that we do not currently provide or enhances the service that we currently provide. You can find a full list of all the supplemental requests in the appendix of Book 1, including the ones that were funded versus the ones that were not. So looking at the staffing highlights here, we talked about both these positions, both these staff adds earlier. We have a total of 14 staff being added this fiscal year. That's in comparison to 26.5 that were added last fiscal year. We do have, like I said, the continuation of continuous onboarding to get us up and running on Fire Station number 8 and to staff the apparatuses that we currently have, which is a major step and a good thing for us going forward. Also, the addition of 2 new police officers in January will be another major step forward for us and something that we like to see, but also need to recognize that this is not where we were at last year. It certainly doesn't cover all the needs that we have within general fund for staffing. Looking citywide, and this is across all funds, where are our staff? Where are our people? This is obviously dollar-wise the biggest investment that we make as a city year in, year out. But more importantly than that, these are the folks who do the work, who get the things done, who move forward those strategic priorities. We see in blue public safety far and away the largest piece of the pie, that being police and fire, followed by public works at 181 employees. That's split between general fund and the enterprise fund, followed by our Parks and Recreation Department. And then we have general government, economic development, community services, and Convention and Visitors Bureau. You do see an increase year over year in each one of those moving ahead. I'm sorry, not in each one of those, but writ large across the city, we do see an increase of staffing. Looking at the revenue side for sales tax revenue, Mr. Pearson mentioned at the outset, but this is one of our major revenue sources in the general fund, and one that we always pay attention to because it is what's known as an elastic revenue source, meaning that as the economy shifts and changes, so too does this revenue source. And this is driven obviously by economic activity within the boundaries of our city. The FY21 proposed budget amount represents a 3% growth over fiscal year 20. Now, I will caution here and really throughout the presentation that fiscal year 20 is not a normal year. We've communicated a lot about our efforts as staff to control for this, but really outside of our control, COVID-19 and the oil glut ongoing have really put a dent in both revenues and expenditures. You can see that here, that the $21.3 million projected general fund amount is almost $1 million less than our 2019 amount. And that's just because of the impacts and the fallout from COVID-19 and from the oil glut. We arrived at the 3% increase over fiscal year 20 by using the non-COVID months for fiscal year 20 as a baseline, that being October through February, and a 1% increase there. And then we looked at 2019 as our baseline for the months that were impacted by COVID, so March through September, to try to avoid budgeting based on some of the activity that we saw from the lockdown, because that's not a normal thing. We don't want to use that as a baseline. So what you're seeing here is a 1% increase on what we consider baseline. That's a combination of fiscal year 20 and non-COVID months, and fiscal year 19 in those COVID months. PEDC projected at $11 million, more or less flat with fiscal year 2019. That projection was adopted by their board in June with their typical budget through their process. New single-family housing permits here. New single-family housing remains a large revenue source for us within the general fund. We are a growing community still. You can see here that we have seen a decline since 2015 at our peak. I will caution that 2015 was an exorbitant amount of single-family housing permits. That is anything but normal. So our 373 housing permits that we've issued to date is a reduction from 2019, but we've controlled for that within the budget, and we continue to see a churn of these new single-family housing permits. We see several developments still open, and we still see that activity moving forward, even if it's not at the levels that we did in prior years. but that is included in the budget and controlled for and planned. So looking kind of big picture at the general fund revenue, property taxes, we see an increase of just about $2 million, a little under that, 1.6, give or take. That's driven by really growth in the assessed value. Mr. Pearson covered it at the outset of the presentation, but that property tax is really driven by the property tax rate and then the growth in the non-TIRZ value. We saw that increase of about $1 billion with a B billion dollars on our assessed value to the city, which is outstripped our projection. I think it was 8%, wound up being about 11%. That's driving this revenue source. Sales tax, we just covered in depth here. I will add that this also includes mixed beverage taxes as well. That's why the number's a little different than it was on the prior slide. Charges for service, you see a pretty big jump here, and it's the largest dollar jump in any of our classifications, and that's really two things. One, the TIRZ admin fee that's driven by property taxes paid by the TIRZ component that goes to the TIRZ, and then they remit 64% of that, give or take, to the city. But larger, that includes Parks and Recreation revenue, and COVID-19 was timed in such a way this fiscal year that we lost about $1 million in revenue, and more importantly than that, we lost a really critical service that we provide, that being our summer camps and Parks and Recreation programming over the summer, which is really their busy season. We add that back into the budget for fiscal year 2021, anticipating and really hoping against hope that next year, we'll return to some sense of normalcy and be able to offer those critical services and programming to the community. So that's driving the increase there in charges for services. We see a slight drop in franchise fees. This drop is driven by a change in the legislature. They are no longer requiring companies to pay both cable and phone franchise fees if they're running them through the same wire. So we saw some lost revenue from that. That's planned, and we knew about that. But we did see growth in other sectors there within the franchise fees that offsets that mainly. Transfers in are really driven by administrative fees from other divisions. Our licenses and permits, you see an increase here. The $3.7 million in FY 2020 is really anticipating a drop by COVID-19 and the oil glut. So that's the increase there. The $3.9 million is a slight step back from what we had anticipated in our original adopted budget. Again, controlling for that reduction in single-family housing permits. Fines and forfeitures, you see a pretty sizable increase. Fines and forfeitures is one area where we've seen a large reduction in revenue, kind of driven by one, the courts have not been open, obviously, as we have not been able to be there in person to administer those. But probably more importantly is there just hasn't been as much activity out in the community, not as much ticketing activity. And that's just driven by people being at home more. So we'll see that come back, hopefully next fiscal year as we start to see lockdowns ease and hopefully a return to somewhat of a normalcy. That $2.9 million is based on an average of prior years, so we see that as a conservative estimate. We obviously don't want to build our budget on a large increase here. Miscellaneous revenue looks a little wonky here, going from $2.5 million to $800,000. $800,000 is a bit of a return to normalcy here. On that miscellaneous revenue, we see two things that are non-recurring revenue. First, $1.6 million of that comes from our FEMA reimbursement from Hurricane Harvey. 2.5 years later, we did see that come through. We're excited to see that come through, but we obviously won't see that come through in future years. We also see the reimbursement for COVID-19 expenses on salaries and wages coming through this miscellaneous revenue as well. So that $800,000, kind of a step back to where we've normally been on that miscellaneous revenue. And then investment earnings, we're keeping those flat, just anticipating the interest rates remaining low from the Fed in future months to come. General fund expenditures shown here by function. Mr. Pearson hit on this on his intro, but public safety makes up far and away the largest component here. The increase here driven, one, by our continuation of continuous onboarding, two additional, police officers as well. We also saw several positions added last year for part of the year. We obviously have to realize those for the full year, so that bumps up our expenditures here as well. General government, that $2 million increase is a little bit misleading because we budget the whole $1.4 million for the COLA in general government and then allocate that out once it's approved. So $1.4 million of that increase is from that COLA. Public Works, we see a small decrease here. Parks and Recreation, the increase really driven by adding that programming back in. We saw a pretty sharp drop in Parks and Recreation expenditures because we weren't offering that program. Well, next year we're going to add that back in. So we do see that increased expenditure here. And then moderate changes to both community services and transfers. The transfers out does include the $1.25 million for the streets and sidewalks funding, as I mentioned before. That's moving from general fund to that infrastructure reinvestment fund to isolate that funding and to make sure it's dedicated towards that streets and sidewalks function. Expenditures, again, kind of reiterating, salaries and wages are far and large our biggest expenditure investment. That's intentional and really necessary because those people are really the ones moving ahead with all the other classifications. The increase here shown really driven by two things: new staff and COLA. The new staff also includes catching up for partial year positions in the previous years. Miscellaneous services, you see a slight increase here. This classification contains really two things. One is the litany of outside services that we retain to administer just the number of functions, across 17 plus or minus departments. We do a lot of different things, so this is kind of a catch-all for a lot of those different outside services that we contract with. Professional development is also included in here. I will note that across all funds, we saw a reduction of $156,000 in professional development. Mr. Pearson mentioned the figure of about $1 million. Last year, that was about $1.2 million. So that reduction is plus or minus 10%. We did use our fiscal year 2020 projections as our baseline, which were significantly reduced from our fiscal 20 adopted. So that's included in this classification. I won't hit on all the others, but you see really nominal changes going through as we kept the mantra going that we need to invest in core services to put ourselves in the best position possible with an eye towards a balanced budget and maintaining that fund balance that we established at mid-year through budget amendment number 2 in fiscal year 20. That was our focus here and really kind of plays out across all of these classifications in our planning for this budget. So take all that and roll it up. What does that mean for the fund as a whole? We are adding $350,000 to fund balance in this budget. That ending fund balance of $19.5 million represents about 23% of expenditures, which exceeds our minimum policy of 16.66% by $4.5 million. You'll remember, I believe it was 2 years ago, Council adopted a range as a policy minimum that 2 to 3 months, 2 months representing 16.6% and 3 months representing 25%, making it a goal over several fiscal years to get us to 25%. This budget is getting close to that 25% amount. Also want to reiterate kind of our success factors and what we look for in this budget. And this should look familiar as we had these in our budget amendment number 2 presentation. First is net add to fund balance. We want to reach 25%. We're at 23% here. This exceeds our policy minimum by $4.8 million, or I'm sorry, that's $4.5 million. Apology for that. And then our excellent AA2 Moody's rating and AA Fitch rating. Really important to mention here that we had a quote unquote negative outlook from Moody's over the last few fiscal years because we had planned to draw down a fund balance. We've reversed that just based on policy discussions with City Council and actions taken in prior year's budget. This adds to fund balance as well. You can see that increase from 19.1 to 19.5 continues us on that path. So that removal of that negative outlook is a really big deal and a step towards a credit upgrade sometime in the future as well. These were affirmed in July 2020, so just last month those were released. We are structurally balanced. Mr. Pearson mentioned that as outset, but despite the headwinds that we're seeing economically that have impacted our revenue, we've been able to make adjustments to stay structurally balanced. And we maintain our core services here. We talked about bringing Parks and Recreation programming back on board. We're also supporting streets and sidewalks. We're adding replacement vehicles to this budget. Both replacement vehicles and streets and sidewalks are being funded at a higher level than they were last year. We're adding investments where we need to add despite the challenges we're seeing on the revenue side. So all these kind of sum up to equal good news for us. And then lastly, fee updates. Not a lot to report here this year. just the establishment of 4 funds, all kind of under one family of funds. Of fees. And that is the establishment of a student membership program at the Parks Natatorium and Recreation Center. This is really kind of the goal to engage those young adults and provide them an opportunity to participate in that critical programming and use of that wonderful facility, which you can see here. The fee did not exist prior to this, and we're looking to establish that program here moving ahead. So moving along to property taxes, we have a dedicated section for this because it's the largest single line item in our budget, taken with the TIRZ admin fee even more so. Looking at the rate here, for anyone listening at home who's not familiar, the city of Pearland component of the debt service, of the tax rate that you pay as a resident is really divided into 2 components. First is O&M, operations and maintenance. That's dedicated towards the general fund, which we just discussed. That supports police, that supports fire, parks and recreation, general government, most of public works. We see a reduction in a fraction of a cent here from 36.8 to 30.50 flat here. The second component is the debt service rate. Now this is levied to pay 2 things primarily. First is our debt obligations. That's our annual debt service, interest and principal. And the second is MUD, municipal utility district rebates, which we're required to pay under those MUD agreements that were established in prior years. That rate decreasing by almost 2 cents, going from 43.44 to 41.50. Roll all that up, and we are projecting or recommending a reduction in the tax rate from 74.12 to 72 flat. We do see a slight uptick in the O&M, operations and maintenance percentage as a percentage of the total, which is a step in the right direction, as Mr. Pearson mentioned at the outset. Really worth mentioning that this is below the effective tax rate or the no new taxes tax rate. Also worth mentioning that our calendar as presented includes 2 public hearings for the tax rate. If we go with this tax rate, those are not required because we are under that no new taxes tax rate. Thereby, as Mr. Pearson mentioned, and these are not our words, they're the county's words, that's a tax reduction based on the rate that we put forward here. Property tax revenue. So in the pocket of the binder and posted on the website, you can find the rather lengthy and newly revamped state mandated worksheet that we have to follow to calculate our tax rate and to wind up at our levy, our projected revenue to the city. With the Senate Bill 2 that passed 2 years ago, we did see it's a lot different now looking at that form than it was just a year ago. But our thinking and our calculation is very similar to what we did last year. So there are really two components to the tax rate that you need to focus on. The first is the general fund levy from our known certified values. That's Fort Bend certified, that's Brazoria certified, and that's the preliminary value from Harris County along with the protest values. All of that is rolled up, and we get a levy amount that we can levy from that. That levy increased by about $1.6 million. Here you see that to 24.6. The second component, and really, frankly, the more difficult one to budget, is how much are we going to get from tax ceilings. Mr. Pearson mentioned in the intro the senior example where an eligible senior resident within the city of Pearland has their amount frozen, quote unquote frozen. That means that once they qualify for that exemption, they will never pay any more than they did the year they qualified. So that means that their value on their house does not equate to the amount of revenue that the city of Pearland will receive. So what we did this year was use an average of the last few years of the collection rate and got to 85%. In fiscal year 2020, we used 68%. You'll remember at projections, we went up by about $900,000. We think by adjusting that collection rate up, we'll see less of a discrepancy next year, less of an increase next year, hopefully, in that projection. So all of that rolls up to $28.1 million in property tax revenue for current property taxes. That does not include delinquencies or penalties or anything like that. That's an increase of almost $2 million there. Looking at the debt service fund side, similar story. Obviously, the rate on the debt service side dropped more than it did on the general fund side, so it's not a one-to-one. Excuse me. But we do see an increase overall from 37.2 to 38.2, an increase of about $1 million on the debt service side. So all that rolls up to an increase of about $3 million, a little under $3 million, from 63.5 million to 66.4, give or take, for current period collections across both the debt service and the O&M general fund property tax collection. So what does that mean to the resident? We mentioned earlier that the city of Pearland is really just a piece of the property tax bill that a resident is going to see. Over the last 4 or 5 fiscal years, we've made it a habit of putting together these sample tax bills to give an idea of how the decisions that we're making here impact residents, impact those constituents and those people who support our services and ultimately benefit from them. A few things to point out here. First is the property tax rates that we show here for other entities, and frankly ourselves as well, are what are being proposed currently. None of these have been adopted and authorized because that process is completed in September. So some of this could change. I want to just add that caveat. This is what we know now and may change going forward. But looking at the blue line here, the city of Pearland line, you see the reduction we talked about from 74 cents to 72 cents. Here, this specific resident increased about $8,800 from 2014. I'm sorry, $214,000 to $223,000, give or take. The reduction in the rate and the increase in the value means about an $18 change on their tax bill from the city of Pearland. Now, probably the most notable thing here is that the city of Pearland is not the only taxing entity on a tax bill. We make up anywhere between 25 and 35% of a tax bill, depending on where your house is and what other taxing entities are around. Notably, this example here doesn't include a MUD, municipal utility district. Those rates can be, anywhere ranging from, the level that the city of Pearland taxes at on down. But this specific property tax bill, we being the city of Pearland, make up about 1/3 or 30% of the overall tax bill. And you can see the other entities on here that make up the balance of that, which will be different for every property depending on where you're at within the city of Pearland. The debt service fund. So this is the other half of the property tax rate that we talked about in the previous section. Looking overall, big picture, we see revenue increasing here about $1.4 million from 40.7 million to about $42 million, driven primarily by property tax increase, but also an increase from transfers in. We've talked about increasing the transfer from water and sewer into the debt service fund to increase the amount they're contributing for MUD, municipal utility district rebates. Those MUD rebates are paid out for debt for water and sewer projects. Some of them are water and sewer projects. So we've increased that contribution from 1.5 million to $2 million this year, as discussed with City Council prior and in line with direction there. That makes up a good chunk of that increase. Looking at the expenditure side, you can see the breakout. The MUD rebates make up almost $8 million that we pay to MUDs. That's not something that the city of Pearland controls at this point. Those are written into MUD agreements and paid out dependent on the value within those MUDs and how much they're paying out in debt and calculated pursuant to those agreements. On the bond payment side, that's the portion that we control and we plan for through the CIP process and adoption. This $35 million, an increase of just under $3 million from 32.4 to 35.2, give or take. Again, planned based on our CIP and those capital needs. So altogether, this is a planned drawdown of $1.1 million. That is intentional that we're drawing down that amount. We want to keep that ending fund balance as close as we can to that policy minimum without going under that policy minimum. So that planned drawdown gets us to about $618,000 over that 10% policy minimum. A good position for us to be in moving ahead. We talk about this every year, but the funds, quote unquote, committed by the city of Pearland. This includes transfers in from other funds and other revenue sources that are paid into this fund of $8.3 million. We commit, quote unquote, that amount to keep the rate down. We commit it because we have anticipated revenue sources from those externals and from the frozen values to offset that. So the revenue projections are what they are at the top. The funds committed is really just a reference point for anyone who's following along the complicated and long state-mandated property tax worksheet who's interested in some of the nuts and bolts. So looking at the big chart here, we talk about this a lot when we talk about our ability, the city of Pearland's ability to issue and to pay debt. The assessed value is really how we generate revenue for debt in the general fund. That's where the property tax bills come from. That's what we keep at the front of our mind. That's what ratings agencies are looking at. Over the last few fiscal years, we've talked a lot about the debt to assessed value. Now, this chart here has a lot more on it than we've shared prior. Just as we've gotten further and further into this, we want to share more and more information. So you see the bar chart, which corresponds to the axis on the left, shows the different types of debt outstanding. So what type of issuances are being paid in any given fiscal year, or I'm sorry, what types of issuances are outstanding in any given fiscal year. So this is how much debt is outstanding for general obligation debt issuances, period. And you can see it broken out by type here. Starting in FY19 and going ahead, you see the introduction of the TIRZ certificates of obligation, or COs, and the 2019 bond authorization as well. Both of those pushing up the overall debt to the city. Really important to mention and to point out that if you look historically back to 2005 here in this chart, we see a drop from 2013 down to 2018, 2019. And that's driven by an increase in the assessed value relative to how much debt we've issued as a city. There are two green lines here as well. That's the debt to assessed value. So the assessed value relative to the debt relative to the overall assessed value that drives our ability to pay. And you see that dropping. You see the line split starting in 2019, and there's two different values shown there. The light green line shows the debt excluding the TIRZ COs. The dark green line includes those TIRZ COs. And the reason that we show that delineation there is because, and Mr. Pearson mentioned this in his introductory piece, those TIRZ COs will ultimately be paid by the TIRZ. The city is on an interest-only structured payment plan until 2029, when we have a balloon payment plan. And at that point, we will have cash in hand from the TIRZ to pay off the balance of that debt. So if you're really looking at what's the city responsible for, the TIRZ, depending on your argument, may or may not be included in that. So if you exclude those TIRZ COs from that calculation, we see a drop again this fiscal year in that debt to assessed value. And then looking forward, the increase really driven by the 2019 bond package voter approved in May of 2019. So total outstanding debt obligations for the city, $440 million at the end of this fiscal year. That's excluding new debt to be issued in 2019 pursuant to the adopted CIP. That's made up of two components. First, $339 million in principal, and then $101,000 in interest. What does that mean for us in fiscal year 2021? That means we're paying $35 million in total debt payments this year out of the general fund. That's made of $21 million in principal and $13 million, almost $14 million in interest. Want to reiterate here, quote from Moody's here that was put forward in their write-up that they published as research for our bond sale. But the ratings here reflect a large and growing tax base with above average income levels and an improving financial position. Again, a nod towards adding to fund balance, which this budget continues to do. That's been a policy direction from City Council and something we've carried out and adopted over the last several fiscal years that has led to those stable, confirmed outlooks for the City of Pearland. So debt service tax rate projection. We talked back in, I believe it was June, about our approach to debt service and moving towards a structured principal approach rather than the level principal approach that we've had, planning around the valuation of the TIRZ coming on in 2019 and how we can flatten out that tax rate a little bit so we don't see such a large drop in 2029, leading into the 2029 fiscal year. So this proposed budget here has a tax rate of 41.50, which is below what we had originally projected. The last projection that you all saw, City Council, was at 43.25. That was based on an 8% growth assumption. We saw an 11% actual certified growth come through, which knocked that down. Looking into the out years, we're also below that projection, again, just because the growth has been higher than we had anticipated. You see off to the right the debt to assessed value for your reference. I will add that the tax rate projections in future years are so fundamentally based on the changes in that assessed value, we always want to add a caveat that the real thing that you should be looking at is the projected debt outstanding relative to that assessed value increase. And we're looking at a 4.5% increase in the next 2 out years, and then kind of staggering that down in anticipation of just less value being added to the tax rolls as we reach that point in our growth curve as a city. So as with every projection that we do on any type of rate, always want to add the caveat that this is all going to change, and this is based on the assumptions that we have here right in front of us. So at this point, we'll open it up to City Council input and discussion. We do want to really ask for 3 things here this morning. The first is any information requests that we can bring forward for City Council budget discussion. Number 2, coming on the 17th, want to make sure that you all have the information that you need to continue this process. Second, if there are any updates or changes to the budget, we want to see those made by consensus of council so we can move forward with that direction. Again, come back on the 17th with that made. And then lastly, and I would say most importantly, we do need policy direction on preparing the maximum tax rate publication. For the 17th, we will need a resolution approved by City Council for the maximum tax rate. We can go below that, but we can't go over it. So we will need direction from City Council today on what we should prepare for that resolution. Ultimately, that gets published in the paper and sets our public hearings and the like moving ahead. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mr. Pearson. And again, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Council, for your patience and attention through that. We know it's a lot. You're more familiar with it than most, but it is always a dynamic process. And I'll just put a last word, Mayor Reed, before I turn it back to you to ask for council solicitations. Mayor, the world continues to change and move and spin, and this is your last budget as our mayor, so I want to thank you for your participation. You've seen a lot of these, and also internally, if I could, just a salute and thanks to John Branson. This will be his last City of Pearland budget as well, and he's been integral to this process and exemplifies the best of public service and servant leadership here. The people that behind these numbers and the work, probably doesn't get as much. I know he doesn't get as much accolades as he deserves, just like you don't, Mayor. So thank you, sir. We'll look forward to any comments.
Job. Well, you and John did a good job on sharing where we stand and where we came from. So I think that you get a big hand of applause for your work on that for the financial budget workshop number 1. Moving to item 2 on our agenda is council input and discussion, information request for budget discussion. And Claire, could you lead us off and to invite the comments?
Right. So, Mayor, we'll format you, please, but with 7 council members and lots of questions, maybe you just want to ask people to round robin so everybody gets a chance to have some comments, whatever order you want to proceed with, Mayor. But back to you, council.
Mayor, may I suggest we just go by order of position? That way, everybody has an opportunity to speak, and then we can react to each council member's suggestions or comments, kind of in a round robin, after everybody's had an opportunity to speak their mind.
So if you want to follow that format, position 1, and just introductory reactions, thoughts, and questions, but maybe not everything, just so we get everybody to get to say everything. So.
Yeah, Mayor Reed, my notes are frozen on my computer, so if I could just go second or third, I would appreciate that.
Okay, good.
And I guess that puts Tony up to bat.
All right, y'all can all sit on mute and turn your cameras off. I got 21 comments. I'll try to hit them real quick. I guess or make it 22. First of all, in terms of the max tax rate, I'm in favor of publishing the 72 cents as presented as the max. On a couple comments to start off, in terms of the 2% COLA and staff ratings, there was a public comment earlier. I know we have kind of online evaluation forms, and we go through that at the staff level. If at some point, whether it's a memo or just a blurb at some point, if we can address the citizen comments in regards to if you're an extremely high performer or the worst performer, you just haven't been fired yet, is everybody getting 2%? On slide 12, professional development, I think that's a little over $1 million. If we can get a further breakout on where that's headed, and yeah, I'm not saying I'm ready to cut it, but in today's environment, I guess defend it, please. Slide 14 talked about the SAFER grant. What if we can get thoughts on where we go? Right now, we're programmed in the budget to cover the firefighters. If we do get the grant, what's the plan for those funds? On the website, the link for budget book number 2, I believe, links out to the set of slides we're seeing today. So if we can check that link, because budget book 2 is where there's a lot more details. Next up, KPB. I didn't see anything again in regards to public comments. So if staff's prepared to address that now or at a future meeting, kind of the interaction between the city of Pearland and KPB funding. If we stick with budget book number 1, I guess, are we going to talk about PEDC, or is now the time to talk about PEDC budget?
No, that's the next section. We've got the special revenue funds and the component funds.
Okay, I'll hold off on that. I guess if we can look at book 2 real quick. Book 2, page 14. Couple things there. The internet looks like the internet charges doubled, or is projected to double year over year. If we can get a little bit more info there. Repair and maintenance. Looks like we went over budget last year, so if we can get some detail on that. And then also inventory, looks like a 50% increase. So if we get some more info there. Book 2, page 45. There's the transfers out section, and I assume this is where I know we'll hit it on the special revenue funds, but this is where we set up the motor pool fund. On the account that ends in .30 on page 45, we go from lease payments of $65K last year to $11K this year. Just if we can get an explanation there. Page 47, and this is when we talk about this being a communications tool as well. Page 47 is where the fire emergency management, I guess, now moved under the city manager's department. If we could put a note on page 47, 47 and 48, I mean, I believe the comparative numbers are over on page 52, where it's the city manager emergency management. But just from for those few of us that do read this, if you look at just page 47 standalone, we cut the emergency management department to 0. I think a note saying, hey, refer to page 52 where it was restructured. And along that line, page 52, the conferences and seminars under the emergency management doubled. So if we get a little more info on that. Same comment on page 53. Looks like this is a new department. It's really not, but if we can reference to where it's been. Same with page 63. Similar to page 69 and 70. Basically just adding some key notes on there. And then page 76 under communication expenditures, the professional contractual services, looks like it went up about 30K for the year. And I guess that's if you go back to page 75, kind of the key budget items for communications, it says no significant changes. But I mean, to me, more than doubling that line item, I guess it's more of a broad picture. What do we use as a threshold to put a note like on the top of page 75? Again, just to make this a more usable document. A few more here, page 83. Again, just the note at the top. I think we're adding an inspector here, or there's something. It seems like we should have some documentation of the key items for 21. Overall, in terms of parks, we've got an increased budget, yet the rec center and auditorium's closed, and I walk by any local park here and it's all taped up. So we either need to get them open, or how do we even defend increasing a parks budget when we're not opening them, as well as from a park recapitalization of equipment standpoint. When they're not being used, I guess just maybe a little bit further discussion at some point in the future. How do we keep throwing money at parks when they're not being used at all right now? And finally, for right now, page 103 and 104. I guess if we can get some more, looks like the recycling center, all we're paying for is $100 a month utility bill. But if we can just get some more detail on that, and that may play back into my KPB comment. And that's all I had for now.
Thank you, sir. All very answerable, and we'll I think it'd be best for everybody just if we can package those up, and we'll put that out to you next week. So,
Okay.
Mayor,
Any other comments at this point?
so I don't know if you want to do position three, or you want to go back to Member Orlando?
Yeah, let me go third. Member Pres can go.
Item 3 is council input and discussion regarding the public direction on preparing sequent master property tax rate publication for formal vote.
So, Member Perez, do you want to throw it in your comments then? Come on.
And that was pretty well what Tony was talking, I think covered pretty well. Any other comment on that item 3?
Mr. Mayor?
If we go in order, I think Member Moore would be up to bat now.
Who is this?
So, Member Moore?
Okay. Any other comments?
Thank you. Tony asked a lot of the same questions I did, but on page 77, on page 77 for the municipal court, we show an increase in miscellaneous services there. Could we get a detail for what those increases are for the municipal court? It goes from 46,816 to 50,034 for this year. And then also too, I would like to see a listing on what we're paying to KPB, because I know several years ago we did not do that, but according to the book 2, it just shows that we're paying the utilities there. But I would like to see what those utilities are. And then For the max tax rate, I'd like to see that set as the 72 cents, which is being proposed. And also the professional development, I would like to see a breakdown on what that is. Is that renewal of licenses and certifications, or is that, you know, trainings, or what exactly that is? What else did I have here? I'll hold off for right now on that. I had another question, but I can't seem to find where I've written it down at, so I can chime in at the end if I need to.
We would have Member Hernandez up to bat now, or Member Orlando, if you would like to go.
Yeah, I'll go. I have a few kind of line item reviews like we've been discussing. I want to make sure I'm not duplicative of those, so I'll say the ones that I'm pretty sure haven't been talked about, and then I'll send mine. I know Member Hernandez had a lot of the same ones too, so I think we'll cover those. My first one was in IT inventory, going from 400,000 in 20 to 612,000 today. It seems like we didn't spend that full 400. It was closer to 270 on the amended budget, but just wanted a little bit of explanation there. Also, over the last 3 years, there was a telephone line item added in IT that, so it goes from 0 to 10 to about $20,500. Then I just wanted a little bit of clarity on the other requirements of what comprises that, if that's predominantly adjustments, or just wanted a little more clarification there. And then just a couple to bounce that I think will bounce other questions off of. The public works and traffic management, the missed materials and supplies, that goes from 92.5 to 116,900. Do we know what that is? I kind of have like a suspicion what it is, but I wanted to know if that was correct.
Did we lose this connection?
Why don't we go around the loop on this item?
Okay, we can circle back on that, Mayor. My point in saying that is I suspect that might be related to the traffic management system that we're piloting, the PUC system. But I just wanted to use that to go into a broader point, just about kind of some of the limitations. I obviously this budget is a huge undertaking and a ton of information. And I just want to make sure that we are able to use that information the most effectively to drive policy decisions. And so the comment I wanted to make there, it was unclear to me if that was the PUCs, that maybe it might not be. My comment there is just that in the longer term, I think it'd be useful to move towards some kind of activity-based costing or an activity-based view. It's hard to make a policy decision that, oh, I want to get rid of this random piece of inventory or this random miscellaneous item. What that actually represents is an initiative that a member of council could say, I want to put that initiative on pause, or I think we should cut that initiative, or I want to expand that initiative. But in the current view, it's tough to do that. And of course, I realize that this is probably the much more common way to look at this. I just think in terms of driving policy decisions, that would be a really useful view. I think in the short term, we had the opportunity at some point earlier this year to review a budget dashboard where you could go and kind of set parameters and filter the data in ways that might be a little more intuitive than flipping between two binders and cross-referencing. Another thing, you know, it's like, what if I wanted to know what is the total, what if I wanted to figure out in 3 different departments, what is 10% of the total salary? If I could go and just filter that, or if I could say, you know, what is the cost of conferences, or what is the cost of food across the entire organization? Just stuff like that, I think would make it a lot easier to derive insights and to make recommendations. So I think I would be maybe shorter term, you know, like this, to see that, or to even just have this in Excel would be useful for this cycle, with, you know, thinking about some ways we can move towards activity-based costing in the future, and knowing, you know, like this much money gets us this much X parks programming or patrols or whatever that might be. So that was one of my points. And then a couple of broader points and requests. I'm happy here that we have a structurally balanced budget. And also I think we get a lot of good news, especially with our recent rating change, that we have some positive, we're doing implementing a lot of positive financial policy decisions right now that are improving our long-term standing. Something though that I think is applicable to, or is a problem going to be faced by a lot of cities, not just Pearland, is that we are building out a tremendous amount of infrastructure right now for a growing city. And we have to be really proactive about ensuring that, you know, we can pay for that indefinitely into the future. And so we've been working on that in terms of these internal fund balances. And so I would kind of like, and I would defer to finance here on what the best way to present this is, but I kind of would like a better understanding of what that looks like in terms of what is required to fulfill those long-term obligations. And so really what I'm looking for is kind of, once we're in a stable state, what is going to be the maintenance cost? And of course, there's a million different factors and whatever. So I think these are, especially now, are kind of rough estimates that we can refine in the future, but just ballpark that we know that we're putting directionally enough money away to pay for these indefinite maintenance obligations. Let me see my notes. So yeah, so for example, I mean, we have this number, we need to spend $4.5 million to keep our streets and sidewalks to the same level. That's using some calculation based on the PCI. As opposed to that, I would probably be saying, like, what is the total replacement cost for each group, and not just like streets and sidewalks. So like, what is the total replacement cost for our water infrastructure and pipes? What's the total replacement cost for our buildings? And then maybe for those categories, like what is a reasonable annual depreciation to apply to each of those? Like this road's going to last 25 years, buildings are going to last 30, the water infrastructure is going to last 40 or 50, whatever that is. I think that would be good. And in this budget, we are heavily capitalizing the fleet program, which I think is probably a really good step. But I just want to make sure, you know, we continue to fall farther and farther behind on the streets and sidewalks in a way that makes it feel like it's not sustainable, that we might not catch up. And, you know, we don't have the luxury in terms of our water systems of not catching up in terms of stuff like that. But these are things that, even though we're a relatively young city, a lot of our development is relatively young at this point, these are things that we can easily foresee into the future. And I think if we want to be fiscally conservative and ensure that those priorities are taken care of, we need to be making arrangements for those now before it gets to a point where it's just insurmountable to try to raise that much money. So that's that point. Another one, and I spoke with Clay about this previously, so but just wanted to say here, I just wanted to expand the table provided on page 10 in the transmittal letter, which is about spending growth and analysis broken out by departments starting like 2009 and going to 2019. I just wanted that broken out by general fund items and by capital improvement items. I think that that's a really interesting and possibly really insightful graphic, but I think it's a little bit distorted just by the fact that, versus general fund spending, capital improvement spending is irregular. And so the baselines are really important. So for example, we see in this park spending declining over the last 10 years in absolute numbers, not in inflation adjusted numbers. And that could have just been the case that in 2009, we had a really big capital parks project. And so I feel like that kind of throws off what otherwise might be pretty insightful analysis about the compounded growth rate for the various departments. So would just like to have that breakout. And then I know we do at the very bottom kind of an aggregate inflation adjusted number. I would kind of like to see that at each level. What is that inflation adjusted 2010 number, so that you can really feel like you're comparing more apples to apples. Two more things. I know that we provide the homestead examples because of the complexities in the formula for calculating property taxes, and so that's that's been determined as a good way to share that because there's just so many variables. I would say I just took a handful of them and calculated what I thought the rate would be, I calculated what the rate was based on what I know of the calculation and got the exact same number. On Homestead Example 9, I got something really different. So I just for my illustration, and maybe it'd be useful for some other members as well, just wanted to kind of, if you could use that as an example of just like showing the work there essentially of what steps are used to derive that. And that will probably end up showing a variable that I wasn't aware of, but would also just be a good walkthrough of on an individual basis how we're deriving those numbers. And then I think I just have one more. The last one is, and I'm not sure if this corresponds necessarily with a budget priority or sorry, with a new budgeted item or at least a big budget item, but just thought about it, John, when you were referring to the strategic priorities and then being developed 5 or 6 years ago. And obviously just based on our term limits, we're at a point where most of the members here did not, didn't have the opportunity to contribute to those priorities. And so we previously said a few weeks ago that we wanted to have a kind of workshop to start to work on those again. I don't know how that's been done before, if there's been like some kind of facilitator brought in or anything that would require a budgeted item, but just wanted to make sure that was somewhere reflected, both, if a budgetary item is required and just in a broader way, the fact that those strategic priorities should be shaping these budgets and actually, shaping everything that we do. But I think it really starts up at those strategic priorities, kind of trickles down to the budget, and then that should guide our decisions from there. So I think those are really important and play a key role, and just want to make sure that there's both a line item there if necessary, and also just that is top of mind in terms of getting that scheduled and undertaken effectively to guide our decisions in the future. And like I said, I'll send a more thorough list of some kind of markups and line items, but those are the big things I had for now.
We're still in the information request for budget discussion for item 1. Let's go on around the loop a little bit. We've had Lando, Carbone, and Moore. Hernandez?
Thank you, Mayor. All right, so I'll start with just the funding highlights. I got a couple questions here, and I wrote down my notes with header or department and then the item instead of page numbers. So I'll try to make it really clear. But under Safe Community on the funding highlights, I just had a question on the 2 additional police officers line where it talks about, and I know you touched on the it includes the police officers' equipment and vehicles to perform traffic and the DDACs. I just was wondering at the next session if we could get some information on, is DDACs kind of a department level policy type approach, or is it something where we are assigning specific police officers to? So I would just kind of, like that to be addressed. And then under the sustainable infrastructure, the admin assistant, let's see, it says include an additional administrative assistant. So I was just wondering, I guess if we've already got one, just kind of what the actual increase is, if we can just kind of illustrate it talks about the increase in volumes of purchase orders, work orders, and so forth. If we could just kind of get an overview of what that increase is. I don't know how you would quantify that, but if it's possible. Looking in book 2, reviewing the enterprise fund, under enterprise operations admin, just trying to find, and for most of these, I don't really try to quibble too much. I'm just curious so if I look at the food and drink budget for that, I looked at the list and they have 9 people, it looks like, in that department, and that budget is higher than distribution and collections, which has 28 people. So I'm just curious kind of what that is. Let's see, water and sewer construction, it looks like if it's possible to address and I'm looking at some of these as like the budgeted versus a potential revised item. So these two are 55. I've got some other ones that I'm going to go over in the general fund that when you add them all up, it's about 165,000 roughly. But water and sewer construction apparel, just trying to justify that jump there. Okay. And then I had a question on our city council budget, actually, on the memberships and dues. And I know what those go towards, but I'm just curious if some of those are automatic, or if they're, only the members who opt in to those memberships and dues. I do think that they're valuable. I think the professional development across all departments is extremely valuable. So I don't want to, get too deep in the weeds there, but and I can send this list, the spreadsheet, to staff afterwards as well. So, but just curious how that is done, if we're opting into that, or if it's something that some of these dues are just kind of automatic. And then a lot of these, and I suppose also to the point that Member Orlando made about more project-based budgeting, if we could kind of see what some of these go to. I just had a lot of questions, like under legal and the city secretary's office, as well as finance had a pretty big one for, and then Parks and Rec also had some set aside for furniture, just trying to find out, what those are for. Let's see. For human resources, trying to find out, and this was in human resources as well as planning. Why are the conferences and training separated into 2 categories? Trying to understand why they're broken up like that. And then trying to understand also, HR has a significantly higher conference budget than all of the other departments. So trying to just get my head around that one as well. And then some of the others in HR, just like simple things to kind of cap some stuff, just employee recognition, just trying to find out what that is specifically, if that's, coming out in the form of, little gift cards, or if it's certificates, things like that. And if there's a way we can maybe drop that to a nice round number. A lot of these, if we drop them down to nice round numbers. I'm not particularly fond of miscellaneous items in any budget, really. And HR's in particular was pretty high. So if we could kind of break out what miscellaneous generally entails, that would be nice as well. Let's see. Also trying to find out why basically there was a doubling in the amount of legal expenses for HR. Let's see. Another nice round number, just recruitment costs. I'm trying to find out if that's like marketing advertising for specific openings that we might have, and if we can round that down a little bit. Let's see, already went over furniture. Yeah, finance in particular had a pretty big amount budgeted for furniture. Just trying to find out what that's for. Let's see. Let's see. IT looks like they're just, you know, I'm not going to quibble too much over their apparel, but just wondering why it doubled. Let's see. Program awards under police admin, same thing, just kind of like, you know, program awards, if it's possible to round that down to a nice round number. If it's possible that we keep that going without affecting the actual awards themselves. I don't know what we're giving for awards, but just some clarification on that. Let's see. So under Parks and Rec administration, there was a line for books, periodicals, and subscriptions that just seemed really just, I don't know, odd to me. I don't, not odd, I guess maybe that's the wrong word, but it just seemed out of the ordinary maybe as compared to some of the other department line items and just kind of across the budget in general. So I'm just trying to find out, that number was, you know, roughly $18,000 for books, periodicals, and subscriptions. Just trying to find out what that is actually for in Parks admin. Let's see. And then also have trying to find out why the jump in Parks and Rec athletics program supplies, like roughly a $10,000 jump there. And then, yeah, the rest of the comments I have are pretty much just kind of rounding numbers to, you know, evens from, like, let's say if it's 11,250 or something, just trying to see if we can push it down to 10 even, things like that. So I can send this list to staff after the fact, just to kind of go over. But like I said, you add all of that stuff up, and it's roughly 165,000 just in kind of general questions. And I know that's not a huge impact on the overall budget, but at least to get some of these answered and kind of looked at a little bit more in detail. Okay, and then I wanted to also provide some priorities that I would like to kind of see addressed, to find out if they're feasible or how we could potentially work them into the budget. So the streets, member Orlando mentioned the PCI, and I kind of wanted to know if there was some additional metric that we could use above the PCI, like a street priority index or something like that, kind of based on things like its impact on quality of life or economic development, or just kind of, you know, its impact on mobility, overall mobility, things like that. And I know that we kind of have that already in kind of the, you know, the corridor plans and things that we do, transportation planning. But if we could just kind of put that and marry it to the pavement condition index and kind of use that as a funding priority tool, I think that would be cool as well, to be able to just see that clearly and not have to go to multiple places to kind of pull that together. I think that moving forward with, you know, addressing actual street maintenance, if we could prioritize where we get the best bang for our buck across a couple different metrics that we could identify, that would be good. And I know that I brought this up multiple times, but also what is it going to take to just kind of beef up the actual, I know Crystal had given me a little bit of input on what it is in the works, but for the minutes functionality and just kind of what's on the website for the agenda, things like that, looking at finally just getting the video hyperlinks working, the voting records put up, things like that, just so it's easier for people to interact with that. I'd like to really see a hard timeline and some milestones associated with that. And then for the animal shelter, I'd asked this last year and would like just a little bit more follow-up this year to find out. I'm not 100% sure, and you know, I've had multiple discussions with multiple people. And so I don't really know what the actual steps would be to get us to no kill status. And so if we could just get some feedback on what that actually is, and even if it's feasible, I would just like to see that. Let's see. Also, investing in building out a proactive database kind of beyond our e-alert system. If we could actually go out and keep an up-to-date list of the different HOAs, civic clubs, sports associations, different pastor contacts, things like that, and really invest in being proactive in our communication, I think that would be great as well. So whatever that would look like. And I've had some offline conversations about that as well. So I'd like to just get a better understanding of if that's also something we can do. And then a theme that seemed to be recurring in this year's budget information, which I really, really enjoyed, was the theme of resiliency. So I would like to emphasize more resiliency planning moving forward. I don't know that we're at a point to where we could get a chief resiliency officer similar to our big brother to the north, but if we could at least look at trying to get somebody maybe in the city manager's office or in another department, maybe as a resiliency liaison, just to kind of see what that would look like and how it could benefit and impact the city on a long-term plan as we look forward, 5, 10, 20 years ahead. What if we can start resiliency planning now, what that would look like, and what additional requirements that would entail. I think that would be a really great addition to the city. And then if we could just kind of to follow up on some of the stuff that Member Orlando said as well, with going through the budget, whatever changes we can make to the process. I know that we had a conversation with Megan, Josh, and each one of the council members discussed the Thursday packets. And if we could just do a follow-up and receive an update on that discussion, if they can aggregate the information and actually give us somewhat of a picture, an illustration of what type of changes might be coming, I think that would also impact the overall environment that we have to interact and go through and actually find how information is connected. That would be extraordinarily helpful, because I think a point that Tony made, I also had to reach out and get some clarification on the emergency management. I was like, it took me a second, and in the back of my mind, I was like, I remember something about this. I don't remember exactly. And then as I moved through, I was like, okay, well, there's the answer. But it just took me some time to kind of connect all the dots. So whatever we can do to clean that up, I would just like an update on it if anything came out of those discussions. So that is pretty much everything that I have. And I'll like I said, I'll follow up with some of this after the fact. And I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Adrian. That's good input. Moving on down, Perez, need your good input.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think fundamentally what staff really needs to know from us right now, particularly in this input session, is what we as council direct as the max tax rate that we want to adopt through resolution. I think Member Carbone suggested the 0.72 rate. I would like to set the cap at the effective rate so that we know that we're not going over, but we still have some room through this budget session to move some things around if needed to without having to raise taxes. I do not think that anything over the effective rate is useful. I also think it's important for us to reach out to our state representative and let him know that the no new tax rate was actually lower than the effective rate this year. So possibly in this biennial, they can work through their calculations a little bit more thoughtfully and come up with a set of calculations that actually makes a little bit more functional sense. The reason why I want to increase or make sure that we go to the effective rate is there's a couple of things that I would like staff to look at and tell us what the impacts would be to the budget while still staying under the effective rate, particularly when it comes to staff and their compensation. I would primarily say that our staff is the heart of our organization. Without staff, a well-trained and motivated staff, all we do, the 7 of us up here, is just bloviate, but nothing actually gets done. and having staff that is experienced in their jobs and feel comfortable in their jobs it creates a greater efficiencies in the organization as it does with any other business or charity or other municipal governments. So I would like to see what we can do to get at least see what the impacts are if we get staff up to a 4%. I think that gets them closer to competitive salaries, at least with respect to those individuals that have private sector equivalencies. I know that we've had some communication somewhat directly to us about certain departments that think that they have some need to elevate their salaries, and 4% I think is the metric that they used. So I would like us to at least explore that option and see what we can do to make sure that we maintain again, motivated, well-trained, experienced staff. Pointing to utility billing, that the failures in utility billing is a consequence of having massive turnover in that department. And that is only one and relatively minor department with respect to all of the functions of the city. So we want to try and avoid that in the future. And I think these are the steps we need to take at our level to ensure that that those type of issues are avoided in the future. I would also just make a comment about individual staff members or groups of staff members that try and reach out to council directly with their requests. I think it's more appropriate for them to reach out to their department heads. Even if they are somewhat organized, I think that's probably the best way. That gives the department heads a little bit better control of their budget. So I'd like to try and, a city manager and each of the department heads just kind of reach out to their staff, make sure that that's kind of understood for the future. I guess maybe to better reinforce the need for our staff to be, to borrow Member Hernandez's term, resilient, is how well we have performed during COVID with a lot of remote learning, a lot of departments that are now being managed with staff members working from home, not being able to communicate directly over the top of their cubicles, a lot of the efficiency loss there. I don't see that the city in general, other than obviously utility billing, which happened prior to COVID, has really seen any kind of structural failures. That's a lot of stress and strain on all of our systems, and we've still been able to maintain. That's a credit to our staff, both its leadership and the individuals, everybody from, in my opinion, the city manager down to the individuals that perform lawn maintenance for us. All of them have worked hard to make sure that this organization remains. And I think, it's incumbent upon us in leadership to ensure that they're happy in their job, so we don't have to deal with turnover. There are a few things I think in the document. I think I'll echo a little bit of what Member Carbone said as far as how it's presented, to make sure that it's a little easier for understand on the chance that others outside of council and senior staff are reading this. Particularly, and this is throughout all funds, but since we're talking about general fund right now, if we go to page 12 of the general fund in book 1, we have a requirement there, or we have expenditures that are categorized as other requirements without any real clarification. You can go through book 2 and you can really run the math and try and figure out what qualifies as other, but given it's our third business expenditure, our third largest expenditure in that in the general fund, or at least in the listing on that page, it being kind of non-categorized is a little, I think, not as transparent as we like to be. So I'd like us to be a little bit more. I'd like us to maybe use the other category, the miscellaneous category, a little bit more more rarely than we are. Something that is that substantial expenditure should be somewhat categorized and easy to track, or we should provide a footnote that allows us to understand what is in that other category or those miscellaneous categories. Again, not to suspect that there's anything being hidden in there. It just seems a little odd to have such a large expense classified as other. With respect to street and sidewalks, I'll say, as I've said for many years, it's completely underfunded, and we need to catch up. I would much rather see us double the expenditures on street and sidewalk than put more into reserve. I can appreciate the benefit of putting it into reserve, but our roadways are continuing to fail, and they're going to continue to fail at a greater rate. It's not going to be, as the chart showed, it's not going to be arithmetic in how it fails. It's going to be exponential, particularly as our newer streets continue to get further and further in their service life, which constitutes the vast majority of our roadway infrastructure and our roadway inventory. As they start meeting their service life, the amount of money that we need to spend in order to be able to keep up with those repairs is going to increase drastically. So I would like us to at least try to get closer to $3 or $4 million in street and sidewalk maintenance for this year and in future years. And I'm perfectly happy that coming out of reserve if we need to, or out of the amount that we were intended to allocate to reserve. In order for us to not fall further behind. I'll bring up as an example those who travel Pearland Parkway on a regular basis. Maybe y'all haven't noticed. I have more of a keener eye for this stuff since I deal with it on a daily basis. But that roadway is not significantly old with respect to the age of Pearland as a city. It's one of our relatively newer streets. But if you drive up and down that road, you can see signs of significant failure. The concrete is cracking along the perimeter, and it's probably within 10 years of needing some significant repair. If we continue to allow that street or other streets to fail that significantly, the budgetary item for us to do those repairs is going to skyrocket. It's going to be far more than $4 million. So it's a money-saving investment right now for us to be maintaining these streets at a bigger clip, as opposed to just planning for in the future replacing it. Because as with most things it is cheaper to repair than it is to replace. I'm willing to acquiesce a little bit on the sidewalk budget and maybe move more to the streets if staff is planning to move in the direction of having a capital program for sidewalk replacements and connections in the 2027, 2028 range, as we had discussed before. So I'd like some clarification on if that's the movement we're making, then maybe we can invest less in sidewalks other than just routine trip hazards and maintenance, and not have to worry about filling gaps or making major sidewalk replacements at this time. I'd also like to reintroduce the idea of us funding sidewalk replacements through developer contributions, as opposed to requiring them to put in sidewalks, particularly sidewalks where there is no other sidewalks close to them. If we can treat it again like the Parks Department, or I'm sorry, the tree fund, or the Parks Dedication Fund, where we can regionalize it and allow somebody to, instead of building sidewalks that aren't useful to them and aren't useful to the city, put it into a fund and allow us to use those funds a little bit more usefully. And if there's another council member that would like to explore that, I think that would be a better direction in order to better fund our sidewalk replacements in the future, and not continue to have this very difficult conversation with everybody who wishes to invest in Pearland about why they're building sidewalks that go nowhere and aren't going to go anywhere anytime soon. Oh, the one other item, we have discussed this in the past. I think that there's enough council support of this based on what's been discussed in public meeting. But I'd like us to starting this budget to begin to either present a resolution to provide guidance and the schedule for this for future budgets. But we have talked about putting or lowering or implementing, I'm sorry, a cap to our the amount of debt per our tax rate. Right now we're about 63%. I think the number I had thrown out is maybe we cap it at 50%. Obviously, that instruction was or that discussion was a little later in the game to get it incorporated in this budget. But I would like to, before we're done with this budget process, implement a resolution if the other council members feel that that's appropriate, and then develop a schedule of maybe reaching that metric either in the next 5 or 10 years, or schedule it to when the TIRZ retires. And that may be a more realistic goal, but I'd like us to kind of get to that point and start with this budget cycle to get to that point. I'd also just state that, there was quite a lot of made of one of our members having a conflict or perceived conflict because of his employment. I believe the transparency is there. That's how that individual knew. I trust that member greatly. I don't believe that he has ever acted in a way that makes me question his motivations as he sits up here. So it's not a concern I share. I don't believe it's a concern that's shared in the community. So I have no qualms or of any of the members participating in this budget, particularly that one. With that, that's all I have, Mayor.
Councilmember Owens,
Thank you, Mayor.
need your input.
It's a privilege to come in last. After all of this here.
Okay.
Okay. One of them I was looking at is that we're 4.5 million over policy, and I guess what I was wondering if we've made some reductions in that in the past, but can any of that be reduced in order to put it into the streets or any kind of a repair of streets or sidewalks? I don't know we can, since we're that much over the policy on there. So I don't know if that can be done or not, but on there. But I thought that would be something we could take a look at and see if we could do that, because we are running so far behind in the streets and in the repairs and what have you. Just a couple of other things to note through here after going through some of the budget process stuff and looking at it and the debt that we have. As it is right now, we're in the general fund 439 million in debt, and that's principal plus interest. And that could be paid off by 2040. And in the enterprise fund, we're 409 million in debt, and that's principal and interest, and to be paid off by 2050. Using that right now, we're about 484 million in debt, so we only got 150 million roughly to take us to $1 billion in that. And in the general fund this next time, we go from 373 up to 435 in there. So that's getting us pretty close to 100 million to be in a $1 billion debt. So I just want to point that out. We've had discussions on that, and I don't know if at some point in time we'll be far enough ahead that we can take and pay off some of these bonds after a period of time or not. But we're for a city of 125,000. I think that's a lot of debt that we're into. Overall, for the budget, I like seeing the point of coming back down to the 72 back out of 74. And a couple of things, I've been just like rest of the council members, been getting some information on emails from the police department and wanting the salary increases and raised up from that point. And I guess that one of the things that was reflected, it was a starting salary of police officer about 59,000 a year as compared to some of the others that was behind in that. And as a part of that, I know we did the classification study, or y'all did when I was out. But in the classification study to raise those up, and it had to be done over a 2-year period of time, and that's over. And I was noticing the budget process. I believe it's Clay. It says it's actually going to go out again this year, or it's out now, to go back in and look at the classification study again for professional services. Number one, I was wondering how much that classification for professional services, a study and the compensation is, what are we paying for that in order to get that information there. And I know in last year's budget, when we came in and we allowed a 2% COLA in there for that period of time. And then additional, there was a one-time payment for city employees of $200 and something thousand, I guess, 2 weeks before the end of the year. And going through the budget, I thought I saw something like that. And I don't know if that was for the longevity pay to allow that or not. But when you come in and you look at the COLA of 2% and you go back and look at the index right now in the southern area, which we're in with us and Sugar Land, other areas, it's been brought to my attention that the difference in there was only a 0.3 to in some area and a 0.3 on there. So, if we give a 2% COLA, we're, about 1.7 ahead of what it amounts to. And one of the other statements we had in there that of the zero increase to healthcare premiums for employees, and as it is right now, we pay 100% for the employee and 62% for the family, which was quite a bit in there, and that's really not done on the private side of business. But anyway, if I've read correctly in there when we're going through on that, and the insurance went up 5.6% increase over last year. I think we're a little over 9 million for this year. Is that from the increase of number of employees scheduled for this coming year to be pushed over to raise it up for that, or what's causing that? I know in this statement in our budget, it's a direct result of sound management in our health claims fund, as we're able to utilize balances to offset the increase to employees while we maintain above policy minimum. So maybe a little bit of clarification what that amount was of the increase. I think it was 5.6%. So I think before I'd make any kind of comment of what to pay employees this year, I think there needs to be some kind of justification. It says that the standard step pay increase in longevity is, and I'm wondering, is the longevity, is that what I call in the budget is a one-time payment? And I know what longevity is for, but is that the one-time payment that looks after the budget's approved, then the checks will go out to pay for those on there? So I would like to have that looked at based upon on that area there, and the other side too. If we are low, on classification for the police department of bringing in new employees or new police, I'd like to see that if we are at a low percentage of whatever the salaries are or should be, if we could look and see if that could be balanced to where that could be improved to do that. I didn't know if they were having a harder time to pay, and some statements were made, like the information I sent you, Clay, on that they said that we've lost several employees in the police department, and I don't know what that was for, the reason for it. I don't know if it's there. One thing that go back to is on our CIP that we have out there. in there, and everybody knows, that's development staff and a little bit of working with the city council and staff to come up with it. And then it goes in front of the P&Z for approval and then back to that. One step I think we're missing in there, which we used to do it in the past when we would do that on the CIPs, the city council would set a priority on projects, which was in the total balance of the CIP that's out there. We would come in and say, okay, out of that, let's go ahead and let's start doing these projects. That's priority one on these projects, which I think, if we did that today, it would probably be the drainage. We want to make sure that, David L. Smith, some of the other places are being done. And the reason I say that, there's quite a bit within that area there. And I think, going back through and looking at, I think the increased staff in the engineering was requested to do before with additional 4 people. But I think, one of the things that, or I believe that one of the things that we may be having problems with, we've got a lot of projects going on at one time. And I think it's overpowering the staff that we have do that. I mean, I think, we put a priority on the projects and continue to do those. And then, back up with the others on there, because, we're talking about a pretty hefty deal of, over the next 5 years. And I know during that period of time, the projects may go up or go down or what have you with after we review it every year, or some are just placeholders for other projects to come out. So, but that was what I'd like to look at on that. I think, I've not really, to be honest with you, gone through everything on the budget. It's quite extensive through there, but the stuff that I have seen, we don't have time to go over as it is right now. But I think there are some areas that we certainly can, and I think to make some cuts in, and I think Adrian identified some of them in that area there to look at that we can do. But it was just, we haven't gotten to that point yet. And the other thing that we get a lot of information on out there, or a lot of people talking about and what have you, is certainly based on the water and the condition that it is. Not the condition of the water, but was also the building and stuff. And we go back through on this, and we're continuing to have problems. And they're kind of, people are coming in and saying now that, okay, city council, what are you going to do to fix it? And I think that's a difficult decision for city council to make on that right now, what needs to be done to fix it. But the thing that we're looking at is, even, I guess, in the last statement that we came out, the 3 inches and above meters, that we got a problem on there. And I don't know if that's something that we can overcome, having people to go out and check the meters and make sure they're computing the usage correct or what have you. But it just seemed like everything that we do in there, that we come up with different problems on there. And I think, something needs to be done one way or the other to get to the bottom of this, and more emphasis put on it to make these changes. And this alone has caused the biggest problem that I've seen in my 15 years on city council, of the distrust between the residents in the city with city staff and city council. And we all know that council members, we sit up there for several months saying that all of us are going to lose our position or what have you, or we should be, sent out the door, which I would say, okay, that's, what you feel. I think that's probably, a good deal to do. I don't know. But anyway, I think, that the problem is that it's got to be fixed, whatever it takes to get to it. And, and my part on it that I really get concerned about is a lot of this stuff was continuing on for over a year and a half before it ever was brought to council's attention and says, hey, we need to come up with a solution. Let's help do that, and y'all help us do that. And so, but I think, that's part of the two issues that we see out there, the distrust between city staff and the people in the city now. And the other side is the transparency of things being done and not coming out, I guess, in time and say, hey, we got a problem with this or what have you. So I just want to throw those two things in there that we have. You know, I don't know if I know the rest of the city, the city council are getting the same information that I get from the residents out there. But I do, as I go through these, on this and the budget and everything, I think, that there is some areas in there. I think Tony brought out some important issues in there, and also Adrian did, of taking a look at that. And I think it should be able to give us a more clear understanding of what all really consists and what areas that we can come back and reduce these budget dollars that we have in there right now. So Mayor, that's pretty well all I have right now. It's just something I think we need to come in and take a look at this on some of the salaries. And is it 2%? And is that the right thing that we need to do? Is it 2% or is it 1%? So, and then trying to make some adjustments in the police department on entry level people coming in. So on the classification. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, good job, Woody. Appreciate the input on that. Let's move to item number 3.
Mayor, can I chime in? I found my one item that I couldn't find earlier.
Found a loose one, huh?
So in February, I talked about trying to provide some funding to PD to acquire a gray key. Yes, this is an additional cost, but on the backside, I believe that it's going to save us a lot of money and put some of those CID officers back to doing their job, opposed to having to go to the city of Houston and sit up there all day long at the court up there to be able to use the gray key to unlock a phone to help solve crimes in the city of Pearland. So I'd like to look. I'd like to see for the next time that we meet, maybe what the cost is for acquiring that gray key, and maybe some information that would back up that expenditure, i.e. how much time or dollar value that we're spending for a CID person to sit up at City of Houston waiting to get a warrant to utilize this gray key that City of Houston has. So I think that would be beneficial to us in the long run as far as a cost savings for PD to be able to have that and utilize it here in our city, opposed to sitting up in Houston.
Good. Clay, I think we have this is some good information for you for the next budget's coming up. But item number 3 is council input discussion regarding policy direction or preparing subsequent maximum tax rate publications for formal vote. And I'm going to go to the loop on that. And do you have any introductory comments on that item at this point?
I did not, Mayor. I was comfortable with with using the 72 rate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're in. I think it was pretty good input for the next budget workshop number 2 coming up pretty soon. Item number 3 on our agenda is council input discussion regarding policy direction of preparation of subsequent maximum property tax rate publication for formal use. And I think the council needs to give you some input on that, but I wonder if I understand what that really means.
So Mayor, that as Member Orlando just said, and it was alluded to by at least a few people, we need to prepare the resolution for the 17th. The recommendation was at 0.72. That's below the effective rate. It's below the, I'm sorry, the, what do they call it now? The no new revenue rate, and below the voter approved rate. And there's one member who suggests at least advertising it at the higher, but that's only one. So if there's desire, and you can change it on the 17th, you can amend it from what's presented, I presume. So
Okay, let's go down the loop real quick. I think there'll be some real fast movement on that. Starting with the lawn dog, this is the policy direction on preparing the subsequent property tax rate application for.
I'm good with following the recommendation of 0.72, Mayor.
Oh, good, super. Councilmember, come on.
7.2 is good, Mayor.
All right. Little is absent, but Hernandez is here.
Yes, sir, Mayor. I'm okay with the 7.2, and I just wanted to add two more things to the previous that are going to be very short. As far as the debt that Member Owens pointed out, one highlight in the book. I know we already went over the CIP, but if staff could really drive home the point of the 245% growth over 20 years. The average city in the U.S. grows between 5 and 7, so let's just say 6%. So the city of Pearland was averaging 12%, so double what the average city in the U.S. does. So if we could show some debt to assessed value calculation comparisons for public review, I think that would be really helpful, just to kind of show what kind of a position we're actually in. And then, I think as long as we can make it work with the 0.72 for the tax rate, the COLAs, I'm okay with that. And I do also agree with Member Perez on the chain of communication as far as communicating for advocating for raises and so forth. So as long as it's in there, and it is, I'm okay with it as long as we can do 0.72. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes, Mayor, I would say, I'm probably it seems like I'm the only advocate for at least showing the no new revenue rate. The only reason I say that is I think I'm okay with the 0.72, but if we adopt the max at the no new revenue rate, that gives us a little bit more flexibility. I think most of what I've heard from council members, there's been a little bit of nipping around the edges for a $30,000 or $100,000 fund here or there. But in all, it's been requests for some additional expenditures as opposed to too many broad-based exclusions. So, that may give us a little bit more flexibility and adopt a rate that's still under the no new revenue rate, but maybe slightly above the 0.72. However, if it's the will of the remainder of council for it to be 0.72, I'm okay with that as long as we can explore how we can increase the revenue to street maintenance and explore how we give 4% to our staff across the board. We can afford that, but 0.72, I'm okay with it.
Okay. Councilmember Moore, I think I may have run by you too fast.
It's okay. I would like to see the max set at the 72.
Okay. And Councilmember Owens, you got any wrap-up comments on this item?
I also heard today that the discussion of some of the people there and talking about reductions in certain areas. If we approve the 72 rate and there is a significant reduction in the areas where, where does the surplus go? So I don't know if we're, that can be, as we're looking now, the 72 is okay, but it may be adjusted later on as we get in there before we actually take the final vote on there and spend more time on looking at the budget itself. So I think I'm gonna hold off saying yes right now until we're able to sit and take a look at the rest of the budget and see what we might be able to do there of maybe making some changes within that budget or redirecting money or whatever. So that's where I stand on it right now.
Okay, appreciate that. Let's move down to item number 4. I think you're up again.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'll just turn over to Neely Walker. She'll walk you through the next non-general fund sections. So Neely.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, and Mr. Pearson. I will be presenting the enterprise fund budget this morning. Next. Funding highlights for the enterprise fund include several new positions, including a new billing team and right-of-way utility inspector, and an administrative assistant. In addition, the budget includes a CCTV mainline inspection system to televise pipelines. Next, the enterprise fund includes an additional 2 FTEs in utility billing, 1 FTE in public works administration, and 1 FTE in grounds maintenance. Next, revenues totaled $49.9 million and no rate increase for FY 2021 required as forecasted last year. Late fees will resume October 1st. Water and sewer fund expenditures total $64.4 million, of which $23.7 million is included for annual debt service. Transfers out totaled $36.9 million, of which $27.5 million is to account for debt service payments and reserve for debt service in the water sewer debt fund. Other requirements department, which includes the transfer to the water sewer debt fund, makes up the majority of the expenses at $37.5 million, followed by water production at $13 million and water reclamation at $4.2 million. Next, proposed expenditures over revenues are $14.5 million, leaving a proposed ending cash equivalent of $19.6 million. The cash reserve minimum is met. The newly created Water Sewer Debt Fund provides for the payment of debt for all water sewer revenue bonds. Expenses for FY21 are $23.7 million. Revenues are over expenditures $8.8 million to account for the reserve for debt service. Bond coverage is met at 1.46. The principal balance after the 2021 payments of $23.4 million are made will be principal outstanding after the 2021 payments are made is $319,500, excluding any new debt issued in 2021. Just like the debt service fund, the city revenue bonds receive positive investor ratings from Fitch and Moody investors. After a year with a slight increase, there is no increase for FY 2021. The 2022 forecast of revenue increase is 17.3%. The city anticipates selling $131.5 million in revenue bonds. A revenue increase of 13.6% is anticipated for fiscal year 2023, leaving an ending cash equivalent of $9.2 million. Bond coverage and cash reserve are met at 1.61 and 25% respectively. Due to the significant capital needs in the last few years, revenue increases have been required to ensure financial health and stability of the water and wastewater system, which follows several years of no increases. There is no revenue increase planned for FY 2021. 92.3% of the 39,000 customers are residential, 0.5% multi-unit, 4% commercial, and 3.2% irrigation. Of those 39,000 customers, 92.9% have a 5/8 inch meter, and the other 7.1% have a 1 inch or larger meter. Residential customers consume 67.3% of the water sold, commercial 14.1%, and irrigation 12.7%. Flow prevention assembly test report fee and backflow prevention assembly test or annual registration fee as approved in the cost connection and control ordinance approved in October of 2019. A hydrant meter cost recovery fee to ensure the return of the meter, and after-hour processing fee for resumption of service after 5 p.m. Next, staff are recommending adding a broken lock fee to cover the cost of the new lock, labor, drive time, and punitive damages. The new service fee is being renamed from connection fee with no change to the fee. The first time subsequent processing fee, which was renamed from reconnect fee, staff recommend a $20 increase. Next, staff are recommending a change to the zero charge calculation to the lesser of actual water consumption or winter quarter average, a revision to long-standing past practices. For new residents, zero would be calculated on actual consumption not to exceed 12,000 gallons until their winter quarter average is established. Billing adjustments will be determined after review of consumption and in accordance with Ordinance AB 7-6. At this time, I'd like to turn back over to John McCarter.
Thank you, Neely. At this point, we'll cover the internal service funds for the city. We have 3 internal service funds, and by definition, these funds support the operations of the city in the operational departments. I'm sorry, the operational funds. We'll start out with the risk fund. This is formerly known as the property liability fund. As you'll remember, back in February, staff presented a plan and council provided consensus direction to carry forward the plan to transition to being self-insured for our workers' compensation. In the past, this fund existed really to pay premiums on our non-workers' comp insurance and to house claims related to those insurance programs. Now this is expanded to include workers' compensation. So you see the fund balance going up about $70,000 to $592,000 heading into the new fiscal year. So we'll have plenty of fund balance there to provide us with the means to start that program, transition from TML, providing that workers' comp, to being self-insured. The necessary steps have been taken thus far, and credit to HR, the risk division within HR, who's led that process and published a few Thursday packets to provide an update on that. Medical self-insurance fund, a lot of discussion around this earlier on the agenda related to the change to employees. This is the actual fund itself. Hopefully these numbers look familiar. HUB, the city's consultant, did present this projection as a part of their renewal for our Kelsey Care plan. This fund is dedicated to our health insurance specifically, so doesn't include dental or vision or anything like that, just the medical claims. We do, and this has been mentioned again, a 0% increase to employees, but at the same time, we maintain a fund balance exceeding our policy minimum by $604,000 or 7%. So we are able to account for increases that are driven by more employees coming on and increase in costs by the premiums charged to those employees charged to the city while maintaining that fund balance in excess of that policy minimum. So we're very excited about the success in this fund here. Next, our motor pool fund, one of the newer funds here with the city of Pearland, established originally in fiscal year 2019. Eventually, the goal in this fund is to have this be self-sustaining, and all of our vehicle replacements will be funded through what are called lease fees paid by operational departments into the fund, and then after the set amount of time established by the replacement criteria for said vehicle, it would just get replaced out of fund balance. Being that this is such a new fund here, we are not to that point yet, so we are paying lease fees on vehicles as they're being replaced. So the 17 Crown Victorias we're replacing, you'll see those lease fees come in the future. Working that fund balance up to where we want to see it to start that self-sustaining fund. One note here, following a meeting with the TIRZ consultant earlier this week, we did add in $1.15 million from the TIRZ reimbursement for FM518. We've talked about this $8 million reimbursement coming from the TIRZ to the city for this project in the future. We're going to see our first little chunk of that in fiscal year 2021. That is a change from the proposed budget that originally came out, but we do want to realize that revenue. So we have that drop into fund balance and those resources available to allocate out next fiscal year. There is no expense side of that allocated now. That's just putting the resource in the fund. Council can obligate that in the future via a budget amendment going forward. We're just realizing that revenue as that's the latest estimate that we got earlier this week. With that, I'll hand it over to Rachel Winslow, who will walk us through the special revenue funds.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council and Mr. Pearson. This morning I'll be presenting the special revenue fund. Highlights for the special revenue fund include, next, year 2 of the Parks Mower Package in the Parks Development Fund, the replacement of dog park fencing at Independence Park, also from the Park Development Fund, and the Railroad Depot restoration from the Convention and Visitors Bureau, on which we will later be asking Council to provide input. Our special revenue funds are organized by strategic priority, and in the Safe Community strategic priority, these funds continue to operate as they have in past years. Several of them, such as court building security, truancy prevention, and municipal jury fund, operate from assessed fees. Included in the police seizure funds are the purchase of a gray key for police investigations. All funds are projected to end with a positive fund balance. In the sustainable infrastructure category, the solid waste fund is a pass-through account. The infrastructure reinvestment fund includes the fiscal year 21 budget for streets and sidewalk repair, and all funds are projected to end with a positive fund balance. For parks, recreation, and events, the convention and visitors fund includes annual operating expenses, as well as the Railroad Depot Restoration Project. The Park Development Fund includes the previously mentioned highlights for replacement of dog park fencing and year 2 of the efficiency mower package. The Parks Financial Assistance Fund is new and operates with donations from the Forever Parks Foundation to assist in allowing those in financial need to participate in parks programs. And in the engaged community, the grant funds include several programs, including the annual CDBG allocations. In addition, in response to Hurricane Harvey, the city has secured additional grant funding for a variety of flood mitigation, disaster recovery activities. The Coronavirus Relief Fund is not included as all expenditures are anticipated for fiscal year 20, and there is no fiscal year 21 budget. All funds are projected to end at a positive fund balance. Thank you. I'd like to turn it back over to Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Ms. Wenzel. To bring us home here this morning, we'll wrap up with the Pearland Economic Development Corporation, a component unit of the city of Pearland. This budget presented here was adopted by the board back in June pursuant to their bylaws. The board does need to adopt any changes to this budget. So looking kind of broad strokes, we do have a planned drawdown of fund balance of $12.5 million. That ending fund balance of $7.1 million is in excess of the policy minimum of I believe it's 10%. Some of the highlights on the right-hand side here, obviously we have the ongoing debt payment coming from Pearland Economic Development Corporation for their sales tax obligations, $285,000. The 288 corridor master plan improvements at $14.5 million budgeted this fiscal year, business incentives of $1.7 million, and the State Highway 35 redevelopment strategy of $2.2 million, also all included here. So with that, we will wrap up the staff presentation for this morning and open this up for City Council discussion. This is related to the Enterprise Fund, Internal Service Funds, Special Revenue Funds, Pearland Economic Development Corporation. Just similar to General Fund, any updates or changes need to be made by consensus of council, and we can follow back up with any information requests for budget discussion number 2. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mr. Pearson.
We'll just turn back to you, Mayor and Council, of maybe the same format. If you want to reverse it for this set, but any feedback or questions for our follow-up. Thanks. Son of me.
Turn the volleyball. Let's go down through the loop on this, and starting with Councilmember Owens. Woody, you still out there?
There. I had it muted and couldn't get it back on. But no, I really don't have any questions on this, right? Well, except for one. On the PEDC on there, when that was originally set up on there with the sales tax, wasn't 25% of those dollars in the EDC to go to infrastructure projects? And if I remember correctly, that's what it was. And I didn't know if we could use any of those on any of our street or sidewalk projects. Since we're doing beautification projects on 35 and everywhere else, I just thought we might be able to use some of those dollars to plug back in on a one-time deal to put something in there as that point. So that's right now, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Good. Councilman Perez.
Mayor, I've got a few things. One on the enterprise fund. I'd like to look at to see what the impacts would be to the budgeting if we lowered the rate such that there was essentially no impact to the 3230 plan. I believe that value was about $1.70 per residential customer. I think before we adopt the rate, I'd like to see, again, what impact that has to us both this year and in subsequent years, or at least until the 3230 plan is completed. I'm willing to deprioritize some maintenance, such as the CCTV expansion of the CCTV program, and maybe even some replacement of equipment, just to kind of watch that until we get caught back up. So again, before we adopt the rate, I'd like to take a look at that. On the hot tax, given the impact that COVID has had on our hoteliers, I'd like to see how much of that we can either reduce for this fiscal year, maybe just take out what we need in order to rate the Conventioners Bureau and staff that appropriately and do other programs that are necessary. But since it's unlikely that we're going to be recruiting any conventions or large events over the next year, maybe we can, potentially, if we're obligated to take it, maybe refund it as we did the $500,000. Again, just to make this next fiscal year a little lighter on our hoteliers. And then with the fleet, maybe this is probably just a memo, but just help me to understand kind of the long-term strategy with the fleet. I think I'm a supporter of the fleet fund, but is the idea to get us to where we have fleet maintenance that's completely self-sustaining, where we have staff members that can, tear through a transmission, fix differentials, deal with most electrical problems in-house? Or is the idea that we're just going to be able to maintain a certain level of routine maintenance, but we're not going to be pulling heads or pulling cams or doing anything like really specialized? Again, not to undercut the benefit of the department. I just want to kind of get an idea of where we're going with it. And with that, Mayor, that's all I have.
Okay. Councilman Moore.
Mayor. So in the presentation, I heard that late fees for water billing would take effect again October 1st. I would say that we need to look at that and assess that situation. As we continue to still have some problems in the water utility billing, and I don't know that we're going to be ready to start assessing late fees come October 1st. So I think we need to kind of table that and look and see how we're going to deal with that. Also, the winter quarter average, it was mentioned that the winter quarter average was going to be changing to a different program. I would ask that we get some information on that new winter quarter average billing to see, are other cities using this? What other cities are using it, and what success have they had with it? Again, with us not having a good hold on our issues in the water utility billing right now, I don't know that it's time to implement a new program to add just more confusion to the issues that we're seeing now. Also, the 1.15 million from the TIRZ for the 2 new positions. I appreciate getting the money from the TIRZ to pay for those positions, but is this just going to be a one-time payment for these positions?
There's no money for positions from the TIRZ. Where are you getting that from?
I thought in the presentation there was 1.15 million from TIRZ to pay for 2 new positions.
No, he said that that was going to the internal service fund and just flows as unallocated and flows to the bottom. So that's all.
Okay, sorry on the confusion on that. Is that just a one-time this year, or is that something that's recurring?
No, that's as we said. That's the $8 million reimbursement for the Broadway work. So the new updates are we'll get a first $1 million in 21, and then the balance in 22. So that's reimbursement. So yes, it's one time.
Okay. Okay. And then last but not least, with looking at the PEDC budget, I'm just wondering is kind of speaking to what Member Owens was saying, but on a different infrastructure project, is there monies and PEDC that we can utilize to help with something from the bond project, specifically the police training center? I understand what PEDC money is supposed to be used for, and I could greatly appreciate that, but when you talk about doing a facilities project like the training center, a safe community is a community in a thriving community like ours. It's best that we can utilize some of the PEDC money for an infrastructure project like the police training center to continue the commitment to a safe community, which no business would want to move to a community without it being a safe community. So I see that I could justify some funding from PEDC to the police training center to help alleviate some of the costs from the general fund on paying for that project. So I don't know if any other council members would be in favor of doing that, but just something I wanted to throw out. That's it. Thank you.
That's Member Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 3 things. First one, I'm very glad that we're looking to update the winter quarter average policy. Seems like a very positive change that we can make pretty easily for our residents. So I'm looking forward to the outcome of that. So thank you, staff, for bringing that forward. I also wanted to lend my support to Member Perez's idea for the developer contributions for sidewalk funding. I thought previously that was a good idea. I still think it's a good idea. One question for staff for the next meeting. If anyone else is interested in this, I still am in favor of the stormwater utility fee. I would like to bring that back for discussion again and see what that impact would be on the budget and the tax rate. I think that addressing drainage throughout the city and having a dedicated fund for that would be funding source for that would be very beneficial to the city. So I would like to see that come back at some point. If we could get some more information on that. Robert did a great job last time. I think it was Robert who wrote the memo providing that information. So that's all I have. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Very good. Very good. Councilmember Carbone.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm fine supporting Perez's sidewalk idea. The stormwater utility fee. I mean, it failed last time. Staff spent a lot of time on it. Maybe we wait till after November, see if it has legs then. But I don't know that, unless I'm missing something, that the votes have changed. In terms of utility billing, well, we got to get the late fees going again. But more importantly, we've got to get it right. And with the latest 3-inch meter issues, I don't see how we can start hitting folks, especially businesses that have 3 inches and above, with late fees when we can't get their bill right. You know, there is the RFP out there for a firm to come in and look at that. I think we need to give it time, let them come in, check it out. Now, if staff can come back and say, hey, we haven't had any residential issues for the past 60 or 90 days, and then we can start late fees going. Yeah, but I don't know. It doesn't make sense. We hadn't, everybody's working hard and this isn't coming across to staff, but I mean, we can't get it right. So I don't see how we can start charging late fees. And I say that realizing that we lost $400K last year because we stopped late fees because of this mess. So it's a frustrating spot to be in, and it can't get solved soon enough. And I don't want to I know there's a line item for utility billing team. I mean, let's let the RFP and that consultant come in and give us some constructive feedback and criticism and ideas to move forward before we just start throwing more money at it. And I guess to clarify, I'm fine leaving it as a placeholder, but in the budget, but I'd like to use it more for the implementation of recommendations coming out of that consultant. If we can go to I guess on slide 63, just to clarify, there was a after hours processing fee. So I guess that's if you pay your account and you want them to come turn the water on after hours. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then the next page, there's a broken lock fee of $50. So that's if they cut my water off and I go out and I cut the lock off myself and turn it back on, it costs me $50. But if I have the city come and do it, they're going to charge me $75.
That's really two separate things. One, if you want it reconnected after hours, then you would pay for basically recover that cost. And that would be the proposed rate for that to recover that cost. What does happen, you're right, is that people illegally break the locks. And so instead of, we would still theoretically come and turn on the water, but if they break that lock, then they have to be charged to recoup that cost. It's just, that happens from time to time. Some people, that's happened roughly 1% overall. So we're recommending that broken lock fee if that occurs.
Yeah, but I guess if I'm looking at it and if for some reason my house gets locked out, I can pay $75 after hours for y'all to come turn it on, or I can go bust the lock myself and do something illegal for $50. I'd be in favor of increasing that broken lock fee maybe to 100, so at least it's a little bit more punitive.
Point taken.
Good point. Good point.
If you can roll back to slide 59, under the 2022 forecasted, it shows that revenue increase needed of 17.3%. Do we have, is that going to be a volumetric increase or a rate increase? Or do we have any idea on what that's projected to be?
Neely, you want to take that? It's an overall revenue increase, which would be distributed amongst the rates. So they're definitely related, but that's the revenue would be needed to cover that.
Okay, and maybe additionally, there's the multi-year forecast section that's blank in our binders, as well as online. So is that coming?
Yeah, so that's just something hanging thing that needs to be done that we haven't completed.
Okay. And I don't remember if we do a rate and volume analysis for the enterprise fund on that, but I guess if that 17.3% is a pure rate increase, that's going to be tough to swallow. I'm hoping that some of that is projected volumetric increases.
So the only thing I could add on that is those projections are obviously hugely difficult, and we make assumptions and we share that about the volume and the new connections, but it's weather dependent, et cetera, as you know.
Yeah. Okay, and then rolling over to EDC, I guess page 2 of their section outlines kind of the structure, and I guess what's missing on there is the EDC board. So if we can, again, from a communication standpoint, using this as a working document, if we could update that EDC page 2 to show where the board is kind of in the chain of command. On page 6 of the EDC, There's an account, a line item salary adjustment. I don't see that pretty much anywhere else. Do we know what that's for?
I can take that one. So the PDC board adopts their budget before council does. So we put that in there as a placeholder for the 2% COLA, just to keep it separate pending whatever council does. So that salary adjustment's reflective of that COLA.
Okay, and that is just a 2% increase.
I will verify that, but I believe the answer to that is yes. We'll follow back up to confirm that, but I believe the answer is yes.
Okay. And then on page 7 for the EDC, under the capital outlay section, there's a vehicles. Is the EDC going to be participating in the motor pool fund? And I mean,
we may need to follow up on that. Neil, you might have to help me out on that. I believe the answer to that is no. We'll have to follow up on that.
Okay. Yeah, if you can follow up on that, and if it is, I think we need to do some adjustments there. And either way, it looks like we had a new vehicle in 19, and we've got another one coming in 21. And is that the standard practice? And what happens to that old vehicle from 19 if that is correct? I believe that's all I had for now, Mayor.
That's a good list, Tony. Final guy up is Londo.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I gave most of my feedback just all up front without realizing we were doing this next section. So I hope staff, to the extent I talked in the first request for information section about calculating what the payments would be, at least for these internal service funds, if you'll consider that my feedback on this item. And yeah, between that and the other members, I don't have anything further to add at this time.
Good. Complete your report.
Yeah, actually, one more point I have here, just in terms of the employee health insurance coverage. I just Googled this as we got some feedback today that the average employer contributes about 82% of the premiums for the insured party and about 71% for their dependent coverage. So looks like we're a little bit higher on the insured and less, and we're under on the family part, but either way, they're kind of both in the ballpark. And with everyone also talking about how uncertain and economically trying these times are, I don't think that it's a great time to try to ratchet up costs for people who are, trying to make ends meet as well. So that's my only other feedback.
Good. Well, thank you guys have done a good job of analyzing and making some constructive contributions for staff to work on. Moving to item number 6, Clay, is the staff follow-up, and where we go next.
So, Mayor, appreciate the last 3.5 hours, all good stuff, and pretty straightforward to follow up on. And as we do, we'll start working very hard Monday first thing to assemble that and push that out to you, towards the end of the week, so you have that, and we can look at that again on the following Monday. But nothing to add. Thanks again for your time.
Okay.
Mask up.
Good. Guys, you stay safe. Start with mask. And keep your distance. And show up Monday for a nice city council meeting. Appreciate the job you guys are doing. You're very, very special. Let's go with our staff too, Clay, and all the participants.
Thanks, sir.
Appreciate all the hard work. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, staff. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Is huh?
You're good.
At 11:50. We're adjourning at 11:50.
Have a good day.
See you Monday.
Roll over. Chance high five. All right. When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. And your mother and... I am totally a hot person. Right, guys? Thanks for being honest. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org.
Pearland has been recognized as a 2019 top workplace in the Houston area. Millions of employees at thousands of organizations took the top workplaces survey and Pearland stood out. Some of America's most recognizable brands are among the list, and the city of Pearland is proud to stand among them. Creating a top workplace is about more than offering great benefits. It's about organizational health. The city of Pearland is among this list because our employees